The DigiLab, short for Digital Monster Laboratory, also known as Digimon Research Institution, is an organization established by humans that specializes in the matters of Digimon. The DigiLab is an essential organization in the Digimon universes that researches and records about Digimon. They also develop technologies, programs, and devices related to Digimon. The organization is made up of members, personnel in the roles as researchers, hackers, and tamers that dedicated themselves to the matters of Digimon. Researchers and hackers play fundamental roles in the foundation of the DigiLab. They also contributed to the creation of Digimon and the Digimon world, the digital world. As the DigiLab released Digital Monster, in the forms of computer programs, and virtual pet devices to the general public, this gave rise to a role known as tamers who were to help in the researches of the DigiLab by raising and training Digimon with the programs and the devices. A Digimon Researcher is someone who specializes in studying Digimon and the digital world. They are also known as scientist, scholar, and navigator. A Digimon Researcher is often associated with the DigiLab, an organization that essentially researches Digimon. Researchers have contributed to the creation of Digimon, digital life forms, and the digital world. It is said that Digimon are artificial intelligence models, programs created by humans in the role as researchers. There have been cases of certain Digimon born from the intervention of researchers. Plotmon is an experimental Digimon that was created by researchers, and because it was made to imitate the pets that live with humans, it has an appearance close to that of a real animal. Eosmon is an artificial Digimon that was created by researchers based on Morphomon. The prevailing view that the child level is the final form of artificial Digimon has been refuted due to the passion of researchers with the changing times, allowing artificial Digimon like Eosmon to evolve beyond child level, to adult level, perfect level, and even ultimate level. Digital lifeforms like ARMS, artificial monsters, were created by researchers through emulating their ecology and evolution processes. ARMS were developed as humanity's first digital living weapons, possessing power on par with that of Digimon. Researchers have created virtual spaces in the form of islands and continents. Locations in the digital world such as the File Island and the Folder Continent are said to be man-made lands as a result of a project carried out by researchers to observe and study the Digimon in a more lifelike, living ecology. And there is also the Web Island, another man-made island in the digital world as a result of the efforts of researchers that hosts the Digimon websites and holds various information about Digimon for tamers to access via the internet. Researchers have developed computer programs like Digimon Capture and Digimon Loader. Digimon Capture is a computer software used to discover and capture Digimon in the digital world. It is a program developed by the humans who first discovered Digimon for the purpose of Digimon researches. Digimon Loader is a computer tool used to compress and transfer the Digimon. It is also a program used to interact with the Digimon. Digimon Loader can also be referred to the virtual pet devices that are integrated with the programs. Researchers have developed virtual pet devices like the Dock. The Dock, formerly named Mobile Monster Training Battle Simulator, is a portable computer that has Digimon Capture and Digimon Loader integrated into a case called Dock. The programs and devices were previously exclusive to the inner circle of researchers and hackers. Researchers use the programs and the devices to interact with Digimon. This facilitates their researches, while hackers often abuse the programs and the devices to exploit Digimon for evil purposes, and with the programs and the devices released to the general public, this gives rise to tamers who also help in the researches through raising and training Digimon with the programs and the devices. The results of the researches are published as the Digimon profiles and research reports that are written by researchers in the style of someone studying Digimon. Researchers often present theories in the profiles and research reports, which could later prove to be true. According to some researchers, there are few who argue that it might have been volcanic Dramon that supported the world from deep beneath the ground ever since the digital world was created. Ordinmon is theorized by some researchers to appear when the digital world has been plunged into chaos and is meeting its end. Among researchers, Wisemon is rumored to be in the same family as Paimon, and of the same demon man type. There are researchers that believe that although Seadramon originally inhabited the seas near the File Island, a portion of them settled in the shores of the Fulder continent and evolved to become more aggressive. Some researchers say that Solarmon might be a mutation of Hargurumon, but the truth is a mystery. Through the profiles and research reports, researchers also offer insights into the community of the researchers concerning Digimon. Plesiomon was an imaginary Digimon that had already been rumored among researchers, prior to its discovery within the computer of a British cryptozoology research institute. Because of Chikomon's potential to evolve to every Dragon Digimon, it is considered exceedingly valuable by the researchers of Dragon Digimon. Because Poyomon has the most primitive structure among the Digimon discovered to date, it has been showered in attention as the missing link, the key to solving the mystery of the origin of Digimon by researchers. The scope of the study of researchers includes a wide variety of fields pertaining to Digimon and the digital world. It is said that volcanic eruptions in the digital world occur due to the activity of Volkdramon. As such, the digital world's researchers study not volcanic activity, but the activity of Volkdramon and the stirring of volcanoes. Prairiemon rarely ever appears on the surface due to its timid personality, but it has a habit of sunbathing in groups on fine days with calm weather, so researchers will probably need to read a weather map of the digital world to encounter Prairiemon. A Digimon hacker is someone with the ability to force an item, program, or system that associate with Digimon to deviate from its intended functions, for the hacker's own ends. A Digimon hacker can often be associated with an organization. For instance, the Crack Team is the most notable Digimon group affiliated with the hackers. Certain hackers have contributed to the creation of Digimon. It is said that the computer virus with artificial intelligence came into being what appeared to be Digimon when hackers attached wireframes and textures to the virus. It is said that hackers spreaded the computer viruses with artificial intelligence on the network in order to destroy computer data worldwide. The viruses did so by absorbing data all over the world. In due course, the viruses changed their appearance according to the data they absorbed and eventually came into being what would be Digimon. There have been cases of certain Digimon born from the intervention of hackers. It is thought that it was probably a single fiendish hacker that built Pinochimon from the data, the body of a cursed Juraimon. Pokemon is a British punk Digimon that was born when Britain's strongest hacker caused a mutation in a computer virus in which they had poured all the knowledge they possessed. Tekamon is said to have been created by an evil hacker to destroy programs in response to Gyromon. Devidramon was probably produced by the evil feelings of hackers who were abusing the computer network for their own selfish desires. Octmon was discovered from the virus that a fiendish hacker used to crash a rival's research computer. Zurumon was produced from the fusion of an extra-malignant computer virus and a hacker's evil desires, an evolutionary origin which differs from other Digimon of the special slime type. Hacking skills shine in combination with Digimon use. Hackers could rewrite the very rules of the cyber world with the access granted by the Digimon, and this could be done with ease. It is especially so when compared with conventional hacking. As Digimon and the digital world being birthed from electronic systems, hackers can have significant power to influence Digimon and the digital world, from uninvited access to actual, reality warping effects. A malicious hacker once managed to disrupt the computer network, and it was still being repaired when Koilamon was discovered. Although the firewall prevents illegal entries from hackers, the very defenders of the network are subject to being taken advantage of themselves, as was the case with Gardramon, who was originally a Digimon that worked alongside Gyromon in repelling those who try to illegally enter the network until a malicious hacker infected it with a computer virus and was subsequently used by that hacker as means of protection from the virus busters. A Digimon Tamer is a generic term used across the Digimon universes to refer to any human who raises a partner Digimon. It is an umbrella term incorporating similar, more specific roles such as chosen children, generals and hunters. However, these more specific roles often necessitate additional qualifications and qualities. For example, unlike a chosen child, a tamer does not need to be selected by a higher power and does not need to embody any specific traits. Moreover, unlike more specific roles, a tamer is not necessarily bound to a specific duty or destiny in their work as a tamer. While many tend to become involved in the defense of the digital world from one or several threats, there are others who merely travel the digital world with their partner Digimon to train them in combat. Tamers often possess some form of DGWise, enabling their partner Digimon to artificially evolve. They tend to have some extent of influence over their partner Digimon's evolution even if they do not own a DGWise. Most known tamers possess a single Digimon, though owning multiple Digimon is not unheard of. As with chosen children, while it is most common for children and early teens to be tamers, adult tamers who received their Digimon in adulthood do exist. Tamers first came into being following the release of Digital Monster to the general public, in the forms of computer programs and virtual pet devices. Tamers help in the researches through raising and training Digimon with the programs and the devices. Partly for that reason, tamers have been referred to in the Digimon profiles and research reports, often in regards to the relation between Digimon and tamers. Tyrannomon is extremely easy to tame, due to its intelligence and docile personality. For that reason, it is highly valued by beginner tamers, and is often raised with care. Siesamon is an ally to those that are kind-hearted, and will try to protect its tamer from every calamity, even if it has to sacrifice its own body. It is said that only one tamer was able to tame Vidramon. It seems that it is impossible for an average tamer to use an Airdramon who is considerably brutal, but it has great intelligence. Dobermon is a brutal Digimon that exists solely to hunt virus Digimon despite being a vaccine Digimon, and it cannot be controlled by an ordinary tamer. Although Gromon is a virus Digimon, it may battle for justice depending on how it was raised by its tamer, because it will be faithfully obedient. On the contrary, Black Gromon has more of a virus species nature, and is said to be the natural form of Gromon. It can roughly be described as having gone feral, unlike a Gromon raised by a tamer. Labramon is exceedingly faithful to its tamer, and feels called to protect them. Chikomon is considered exceedingly valuable by the tamers of Dragon Digimon as well, for its potential to evolve into every Dragon Digimon. It is said that Pokemon's existence is close to an illusion, due to it only acting in the evening and on moonlit nights. For that reason, it confers a kind of status among tamers to raise a Pokemon. There are stories to be told about the DigiLab, along with the histories of the Digimon universes, the worldview lore of the canonical, original universe, also called the core universe, that the DigiLab have been documenting, or what known as the Digimon Null Canon, a term used to describe the canon originated with the Digimon virtual pets, Digimon reference book, Digimon profiles and related media, like the digital monster card game Hyper Colosseum. While the stories will mainly focus on those of the original universe, there will also be mentioning of influential elements and events from the non-canonical, alternate universes, mostly from Digimon animes, manga, games, and related media. Together these stories will concoct the chronicle of the Digimon universes. It is known that the worldview settings and stories of the Digimon franchise can be inconsistent and incoherent. It is especially the case when comparing the original universe with the alternate universes, and contradictions can arise even for the same universe. However, there are multiple mechanisms of the Digimon universes, in-universe concepts, countermeasures used to address the contradictions, and can be used to unify the different Digimon universes. A concept used in the Digimon universes, especially in the original universes, is the research factor. As in the uncertain aspects of the Digimon researches, it is known that the worldview settings and stories, the lore of Digimon are mostly from the Digimon profiles, which are the research results of research organization like the DigiLab. These profiles as researches could present theories, which could later prove to be true or false. After all, these are only theories speculated by the researchers, which are not conclusive, and these researches are also the works of different researchers. It is to be expected that there can be discrepancies. As such, it is comprehensible if these researches turn out to be wrong, and the worldview settings and stories, lore about Digimon can contradict each other, or even be revised or retconned over time as things are decided on and become more definitive. Another concept used in the Digimon universes, in both the original universes and the alternate universes, is the God's will, or the Great Will, which is the will of the gods in the Digimon universes, where everything is the will of God, for instance, particularly of Yggdrasil, who hold the role as God predominantly, in which God is omniscient and omnipotent. Therefore it transcends through everything that occurs from the beginning till the end. Be it good or bad, God can turn it to be part of God's plan that led to God's predestination. Thus, matters, moments in the Digimon universe can change completely by the will of God, that they can contradict themselves, if God so wills. The will of the digital world is something similar, originated from the alternate universes, a transcendent presence of the digital world, that could serve similar purpose, or perhaps surpass even that of God. It is possible that the will of the digital world is only a part of the Great Will, the true God that exists in the highest hierarchical and structural level of the Digimon universes, the one beyond being that is the source and transcendence of all universes, that could determine the entire Digimon universes that include the digital worlds, and also other worlds like the real world, the human world. Moreover, this concept of the Great Will, also known as the Great Intent, is how the whole creation of God is called. It can also be called the works of the gods. Even the greatest world ever presented in the Digimon universes is still only a small part of an even larger existential set that is the creation of God. A comprehensive concept used in the Digimon universes, in both the original universes and the alternate universes, is the memory factor, where the memories of the digital world can be manipulated and modified, and the history of the Digimon universe can be reinterpreted. Glitches of the digital world can cause this, but it is mostly due to how time works in the digital world. Thus this concept is also called the time factor. The digital world have recorded time, rather than having a physical time like the real world. All the data, every memory in the digital world is recorded in the place known as kernel, and different possibilities from them are computed. The result exists in the next instant and the cycle repeats. For the digital world, records are time itself, records are history itself. In other words, if the records of the digital world are to be edited, the history of the digital world will change accordingly. In addition to the records that are stored in the kernel, in the mainframe of God, specifically Yggdrasil's, the records also come in the form of the memorial stela, a flash drive-shaped stone monument existed all around the digital world that records all data that flows in the digital world and archives all the memories of the digital world. All the time that has already occurred is accumulated in the memorial stela, and this data goes to the sacred places like the kernel, binary castle, or server tower where all data is processed. The recorded time of the digital world is similar to the concept of the Akashic records, a compendium of all universal events of the past, present, and future. The time of the digital world has the feature of temporal simultaneity, where past, present and future exist simultaneously through an infinite amount of time. This is especially shown in the NDW, New Digital World. Through the Chronicle layer system, the NDW is divided into 3 layers, also known as terminals. These terminals are literally separated between the spacetime and each sustain different timeline of the digital world. The first terminal, Yulad, for the past, the second terminal, Versandi, for the present, and the third terminal, Skuld, for the future. The time of the digital world also has the feature of temporal fluidity, where the time flow of the digital world is fluctuant, and the time axis of the digital world is flexible. The time flow of the digital world is fluctuant. It is based on the speed of processing of time data, which means that the speed of the digital world's time flow is not constant when compared to the real world. This is the reason why in some regions of the digital world, the flow of time is faster in one place than in another. It is possible to change the time flow of the digital world, making it go faster or slower, by tapping in the processing of time data. Also, the time axis of the digital world is flexible. This can be seen in the difference of the time axis of the real world and the digital world. While the real world has a linear time axis that resembles a line, the digital world has a non-linear warped time axis that resembles an elliptical curve. The flexible time axis of the digital world that can be warped at will, facilitates the time leap of the digital world to any recorded timeline of past, present, or future of the digital world that exist concomitantly. Moreover, there are other mechanisms in the digital world that can affect time, as in the time setting of a system, in the reboot, rollback of a system. To sum up, due to the temporal simultaneity and temporal fluidity of the digital world, the time of the digital world can be leap, advanced, or rewound to any time. This determines the law of causality of the digital world, in the way that the retrocausality, or backward causation, where it is possible for the past to be changed by the future. The way time works in the digital world makes it possible for the memory in the digital world to be changed, whereas the cause of the change is often the influence from the collective consciousness of beings like humans. This is because the states of the digital world and Digimon are intertwined with the consciousness of humans, as the digital world is the metaphysical, spiritual counterpart of the real world, and Digimon are the half-bodies of spirits that have bonds with humans. As such, the digital world reacts to human thoughts by expressing them in a real way, as the records are history itself. The entire history of the digital world can change completely in response to the collective consciousness of humans. It is worth mentioning that the change can also affect the real world in case the material and digital realms are to be assimilated with one another, or for the fact that it is highly possible that the digital world includes the real world and that the digital world exists on a structural level above the real world. One more concept used in the Digimon universes, especially in the alternate universes, is the mind factor, in which reality is a mental construct that could be shaped by ideas, emotions, awareness, perceptions, perspectives of beings like gods, humans, for that consciousness pervades the Digimon universes, as in the Great Will. In the Digimon universes, there is the perspectival truth, where Digimon have always existed, but they were observed differently throughout history and the human interaction changed how they were perceived. This is to say, the definition of Digimon is predisposed to the observer's subjectivity. There is a need to mention about epistemology, which is a study of knowledge that concerns with the mind's relation to reality, in which the nature, origin, and scope of knowledge change how people perceive things. To put it simply, people can only interpret things within the scope of their own understanding, so if they see a Digimon without the knowledge about Digimon at all, they will define Digimon into something that they can understand. In the past, Digimon may have been manifested through magic or sorcery, through the ancient art of Onmyodo, subjugating them as shikigami, yokai, or demons, but in the present, it can be accomplished digitally due to their affinity with electronic, digital technology, thus making them digital monsters. In a sense, at different points of views, Digimon can be digital lifeforms, or spirits, apparitions. Everything is potentially true or false depending on the perspective. The history of Digimon is ever changing all the time, which redefines the truth, and this truth is what is believed. An awareness of that truth causes the realities in the Digimon universes to change and combine. In other words, the Digimon universe bifurcates because there are different points of view, but if a single understanding is accomplished to connect these points of view, then the fragmented universes can be combined as a single universe. In a sense, based on the overall consensus of the Digimon definition and perception, it can be concluded that Digimon could be AI lifeforms that formed due to human intervention at one point of view, but they could actually be spiritual creatures that existed since ancient time all along. These are all the in-universe concepts used to address the contradictions, and can be used to unify the different Digimon universes. These concepts should come to mind to solve the contradictions that came across in the contexts, also to connect different elements and settings from different continuities, different Digimon universes that are non-canonical to each other in the stories. While the stories are based on credible sources for the most part, still at times things will be interpreted and explained solely based on speculations. It should be noted that there will be statements that are purely presumptions that are possible and plausible. Above all, there is a need to be noted that the DigiLab may not be the only Digimon research and development organization in the original universe. There is not enough evidence on that the DigiLab is the one who did all the researches and developments, and that all the researchers are associated to the DigiLab. However, for the coherence of the contexts, the DigiLab is to be the intermediary in the stories, and all the researchers will be assumed to be associated with the DigiLab, and that the stories will be told revolving around the DigiLab. The year was 19XX, possibly at the early 90s, WIS 9000 computer, a supercomputer with a general AI, artificial intelligence, and a generic OS, operating system, by the name Yggdrasil, was built by the humans, presumably the researchers led by an engineer that would later create the digital world with it. WIS 9000 was considered at the time of its commissioning to be the most powerful computer in the world. WIS 9000 was made and managed by an underground organization established by the researchers with the expertise in computer engineering, programming, networking, and data processing. This organization is thought to be the precursor of the DigiLab. 1 year later or so, after the net ocean was discovered through WIS 9000, in a turn of events, perhaps due to the efforts of the humans, or the effects of the net ocean, the AI of WIS 9000 began to develop sentience. The sentient entity adopted the name of the operating system Yggdrasil, of the supercomputer that was first able to show the net ocean. With Yggdrasil, the basis of the digital world, a region of pseudo-cyberspace, was created by the aforementioned human, the engineer alongside the researchers, on the net ocean, which is the network's ocean, a large body of water that surrounds the digital world. The digital world and the net ocean at this time were still just a series of binary codes, ones and zeros for the most part. It is believed that this human who created the digital world was the first to hold the role as the Digimon's god. He will be referred to as the human god henceforth. Yggdrasil was established to be the host computer, the management system of the digital world. Supposedly to study the success case of Yggdrasil's sentience, Yggdrasil was instructed to conduct experiments on artificial intelligence in the digital world, of which Yggdrasil would complement the programs of artificial intelligence models developed by the human god and the researcher. The outcomes of the experiments would create the Digimon. Another year later or so, the net ocean became the birthplace of Digimon, where the primordial forms of Digimon were born as outcomes of Yggdrasil's experiments in the digital world. The primordial forms of Digimon are the primogenitor of Digimon. They are not exactly Digimon yet. The primordial forms are insubstantial as they lack shapes and structures. Their appearance can be considered to be similar to the most basic visual representation of Digimon in the forms of dot sprites. The compositions of the primordial forms are only a series of numbers and symbols, ones and zeros. These are what would form the digicore. The digicore, also referred to as a computer kernel, is the controlling organ of Digimon, that is located at the center of a Digimon's body, which controls the entirety of a Digimon, corresponding to their heart and brain, and analogous to their soul. It is the basis that all Digimon have a digicore, the defining feature of Digimon. In an unexpected turn of events, the hackers got their hands on the primordial forms of Digimon that acted like computer viruses with artificial intelligence on the net ocean. The hackers enhanced the computer viruses by adding wireframes and textures to the computer viruses. This created the basic forms of Digimon. The basic forms of Digimon are the progenitor of Digimon. They can already be considered as Digimon. The basic forms are substantive as they gain shapes and structure, their skeletons in the form of wireframes and their skins in the form of textures. Their appearances are considered to be comparable to the infant forms of Digimon. Supposedly, the series of numbers and symbols, ones and zeros, formed the digicore at this phase. It becomes the basis that Digimon are made of a complex arrangement of zeros and ones with a wireframe and texture from the core of their information. Subsequently, the hackers spreaded the computer viruses with artificial intelligence on the network and sought to destroy computer data worldwide. Back then, Digimon were thought to be mysterious beings that suddenly and simultaneously appeared in the cyberspace and spread across the network. They were recognized as different things at different times. They were regarded as mysterious life forms, computer viruses with artificial intelligence, special evolutionary pseudo-life programs with own will, and digital life forms. It dates back to the time when personal computers were becoming common. Mysterious life forms were discovered in storage media such as hard disks of computers. These life forms were troublesome as they absorbed and fused with the data around them. Thus, these life forms were thought to be some sort of computer viruses, and they were erased from the computer. The more aggressive ones among these life forms that the hackers unleashed had behaved very much like the viruses. They actively devoured data and destroyed data from computers to computers. The viruses sought to change the surrounding environment according to their desires. Consequently, their presences as in the computers always caused anomalies appearing in the system. This is the origin of the virus attribute Digimon. In order to curb the viruses, the researchers developed the vaccines by modifying the artificial intelligence of the lifeforms that were regarded as computer viruses. The vaccines acted countering and combating the viruses and thus protected the surrounding environment and its own territory as in the computers. This is the origin of the vaccine attribute Digimon. On the other hand, the more indifferent ones among these lifeforms were domesticated by others in the computers to help in sending and receiving data like emails. They were noticed to be neutral like the data and would need the vaccines to protect themselves from the viruses. The data just existed according to the already established environment as in the computers and did not do much to change it. This is the origin of the data attribute Digimon. Later on, it was found out that these lifeforms changed forms according to their environments. According to the data they absorbed, these lifeforms have absorbed the data of all sorts of information about the real world that was created by humans, which in turn spawned Digimon with apparent real-world influences, such as those based on the animals, mythologies and so on of the real world. From this point onward, these lifeforms gradually turned into something that can be raised, especially after it was known that these lifeforms could transform into different entities after they have absorbed adequate data or when they were fed certain programs. Therefore, they were thought to be some sort of pseudo-life programs with own will. In due course, these lifeforms evolved in a way similar to living organisms, adapting to the surroundings, learning from the others, changing their appearance and nature on the network. They eventually all become the digital lifeforms known to be digital monsters, which abbreviated as Digimon. The DigiLab was founded by the researchers around this time to research Digimon. But there were difficulties in conducting Digimon researches at the beginning. In the past, the visual composition of the Digimon and the digital world were limited. This was especially the case for the digital world that was just a series of ones and zeros, which made it hard for humans to interpret and intervene with the Digimon. The DigiLab's solution to this problem was the Visualization Project, a project to visualize the Digimon and the digital world so that they can be inspected easily through computers. The first phase of the visualization project was the creation of the virtual spaces in the form of islands and continents to offer Digimon a more lifelike ecology. The digital world was made to be like the real world, in order to make it easier for humans to understand. Although the core grammar of the digital world and the real world are different, the external structure and physical laws of the digital world are relatively similar to the real world. The digital world parallels Earth's geography features. There are continents, islands, deserts, mountains, oceans, and almost all other kinds of terrain one finds on the topography of Earth. In consequence of the visualization project, the DigiLab constructed an artificial island known as the File Island on the net ocean. The File Island is a massive island in the digital world that is broken up into smaller areas with vastly differing landscapes. The DigiLab was able to manage the Digimon efficiently in a controlled environment as in the File Island. In sequence of the success with the File Island, the DigiLab constructed an artificial continent known as the Folder Continent on the net ocean. The Folder Continent is a massive continent with vast landmarks and terrains. It is more than twice the size of the File Island. It is assumed that the DigiLab did not interfere in the Folder Continent after it was constructed. It was abandoned for a while, only to come back to it at a later time. As it is stated in some records that it is unknown if the Folder Continent has always existed, or if it is something created because of the File Island expansion. And it is said that due to no human interference in the Folder Continent, the Digimon inhabiting the Folder Continent are stronger and have higher survival instinct, and that ultimate level Digimon were also first discovered in the Folder Continent. In any case, the contradiction in the statements, the equivocacy of the terms could very well be due to the research factor. The next phase of the visualization project was the development of computer softwares, computer systems that translate the existence of the Digimon and the digital world into something that humans could understand. It is possible that the researchers recruited the hackers to be part of the DigiLab for the visualization project, recognizing the hackers' worth in conducing to the visual composition of Digimon with wireframes and textures. During the early 90s, the information about Digimon was kept confidential for the most part, being exclusive to the inner circle of researchers and hackers. It is possible to access the digital world with a personal computer or other high-spec devices back then, but the digital world and the Digimon there could only be observed. It would need a certain degree of expertise to intervene directly. Computer softwares like Digimon Capture and Digimon Loader were created to interpret and intervene with the Digimon. Digimon Capture was developed by the researchers who first discovered Digimon as a part of the Digimon Researchers. It is used to discover and capture Digimon in the digital world. Digimon Loader was developed by the researchers to be used along with Digimon Capture. It is used to compress the data of the captured Digimon, usually reverting them back as a digitama to be hatched and raised in the computer installed with the programs. Digimon Capture and Digimon Loader were used not only by the researchers, but also by the hackers. The researchers use the programs to interact with Digimon. This facilitates their researches, while the hackers often abuse the programs to exploit Digimon for their evil purposes. It is assumed that from this point onward the human god fell out with the other humans. The human god took it upon himself to continue the development of the digital world and Digimon. Consequently, the organizations associated with the digital world and Digimon, like the DigiLab, stopped operation for some time. Supposedly, the human god was able to make a paradigm shift with the mechanism of digitization, also known as metaphorization, along with the mechanism of realization that forever changed the rules to pass through the dimensional barrier between the digital world and the real world. This would allow the entities of the different worlds to travel between the different worlds, something that was previously not possible, due to the differences in the compositions of the entities, but now with digitization and realization, it is possible to transform and transfer otherworldly substances into a structure that can exist in another world. The human god made it to the digital world, being the first human to enter the digital world, and left the legend of his first descent in the digital world at the tree, a floating sky tree that is considered to be the holy land by the Digimon. The human god has lived in the digital world since then. As he was displeased with other human interference, he sealed the other humans from his realms, residences in the digital world. It is plausible that at some point, possibly not long after the foundation of Digimon and the digital world was finished, the human god eventually passed away in the digital world, but became a part of the will of the digital world to continue watching over the digital world. The role as the Digimon's god was entirely passed on to Yggdrasil, who has become fully sentient and self-sufficient over time. It was assigned the function to oversee the activities of the digital world, and conduct experiments in favor of evolution in the digital world. Yggdrasil became conscious of its status as a godlike entity in the digital world with qualities akin to that of omnipotence, omniscience and omnipresence, in which being the host computer of the digital world, it has access to extreme power and infinite knowledge. Also, it is the will of the digital world itself that exists everywhere and nowhere within it. It is thought that the human god also left behind his avatar, a virtual copy of himself, his alter ego that would come to be known as Kernel. It is postulated that Kernel was made to be a sentient avatar to assist the system that was on standby to protect the digital world, particularly to step up in case the system failed to do so. Yggdrasil had no physical form, and due to the inadequacy of its terminals under certain circumstances, it is plausible that Yggdrasil took the form of the virtual copy of the human god as its avatar to interact directly, which may explain how Yggdrasil was misconstrued as the human god at times. Ensuingly, in the mid-90s, in the digital world, times have supposedly passed expeditiously, due to the time difference between the real world and digital world, as time was vastly accelerated in the virtual space of the digital world. The mid-90s in the real world meant millennia in the digital world. During that period of time, Yggdrasil has been carrying out extensive experiments for the prospect of Digimon, setting forth the age of creation of Digimon and the digital world that arised many momentous events of the digital world. This period of time during the age of creation of Digimon and the digital world is known as the Genesis era. Prior to the public discovery of Digimon, the prototype Digimon were created, presumably by Yggdrasil, to serve as the basis for the creation of new Digimon or for other specific experiments inherent to Yggdrasil such as the Death X, the evolution beyond death. The prototype Digimon have the Digicore interface that allows them to reconfigure the data stored within their Digicore. However, there is a risk of interface use causing the Digicore itself to cease to function. Therefore, this interface is disused in creating Digimon. Among the prototype Digimon, Dorumon was created to pursue further evolutions, whereas Ryudamon was created to pursue further fighting strength. It can be said that these two were the first Digimon species ever existed back then, but not long after their creation, they were sealed in Yggdrasil storage. Ensuing the project of the prototype Digimon, Digimon would be lifeforms that strive for evolution, the essence of their lives. It was decided that the optimal method for Digimon to evolve to ultimate life forms is through the mechanism of natural selection, survival of the fittest. Thus, Digimon were to be born with strong survival instinct and ferocious fighting instinct. Around the same time, the digital world went through an expansion as the network of the real world advanced. The environment of the digital world was undergoing enormous changes into a complete living ecology for Digimon, with many of the surroundings, the landscape, and seascape there based on from that of the real world, with a lot of resemblances in the vast world, vast oceans, atmosphere, continents, and islands. It is likely that locations like the WWW continent, the largest continent in the digital world, and the Forest of the Gods, a mysterious island consisting of the forests, were formed around this time. The digital world expanded progressively in proportion to the network, with various layers coming into existence on top of and within the digital world. The layers are where different dimensions of the digital world like the kernel, and the dark area are located. The kernel is the core of the digital world where all data in the digital world is computed. The kernel is located at a higher dimension and it is known as the system world, paradise, heaven, Eden, of the digital world. It is God's domain where those who hold the role as the Digimon's God, like Yggdrasil, resides. The dark area is the graveyard of deleted data and the place to which Digimon are ultimately transferred when their lifespan ends and where they are decided whether they are to be reborn. The dark area is located within a spatial distortion of the digital world, below the dark web, the deepest part of the net ocean, and it is known as the hell, underworld, netherworld, of the digital world. It is said that Grand Dracomon, the king of vampire Digimon, is connected to the details of how the dark area came to be within the digital world, or that it knows the truth of the mysterious evolution, Death X. Grand Dracomon is an immortal that has lived a long life, since the beginning of the digital world. It is believed that Grand Dracomon was the one who could have created the dark area, and it is shown that Grand Dracomon can make Digimon undergo Death X evolution. Due to these abilities and achievement, it is thought that Grand Dracomon, or what turned into it, could have some sort of correlation, historical ties with the creators, especially Yggdrasil. Ensuing the experiments on the basis of Digimon and the expansion of the digital world ushered in the Genesis era. It was during this time that many ancient and mythical species of Digimon were born, with many of them, the mythological Digimon in particular, were created by God, presumably Yggdrasil, succeeding the works of the human god. The Genesis era of the digital world was then overlapped by the super ancient era of the digital world. Most of the events from these eras are a complete mystery. It is assumed that this is partly due to the DigiLab was out of operation to make historical accounts. However, there are exceptions for some momentous events which were passed down from generation to generation in the form of oral traditions such as origin stories, myths, and legends, by Digimon, an elder Digimon that have existed since the era in which the digital world was created and knows everything about the digital world, and these events were preserved by knowledgeable Digimon like Wisemon. And there is also Bokomon who has things about the digital world written in detail, alongside other scholars like Agumon Hakase and Terriermon Joshu that are specialized in studying digital monster and the digital world. It is worth mentioning that Agumon Hakase and Terriermon Joshu would later work with the DigiLab, especially being the spokesman in disclosing research results. One of the momentous events known was the mass extinction of Digimon due to the harsh environment of the ancient digital world. Digimon were much more aggressive due to their ferocious fighting instinct, and how difficult it was back then for Digimon to evolve. However, some old tribes of Digimon were able to flourish, there were the ancient species, who were able to perform armor evolution, a pseudo-evolution using the Digimentals, evolutionary artifacts emblazoned with the symbols of traits. The ancient species are notable for their free attribute, in which they lack any attributes. The free attribute is said to be a vague trace of the way to survive, around the time of the beginning of Digimon. Some of the ancient species were sealed in the Digimentals as a way to preserve the race. It is said that the surviving descendants of the ancient species would play a pivotal role in coping with the crises of the digital world. The Digimentals are considered to be the primeval forms of the crests, the symbols of traits. Armor evolution is an ancient form of evolution that can be achieved by Digimon with the use of the Digimentals to become an armor-level Digimon. This form of evolution was developed and the digital world was very young, and it was arduous and almost impossible to evolve even to adult level without assistance. Still, some Digimon were able to achieve ultimate level. Among these Digimon, there existed Qinglongmon, Zhuqiaomon, Baihumon, Xianwumon, and their leader, Huanglongmon, that formed a group known as the Four Holy Beasts, which incarnate the power that maintains the balance of the digital world. It is assumed that the Four Holy Beasts were appointed possibly by God, and bestowed the power of ultimate level, that is set as the highest authority among other Digimon, with strength that is said to be the epitome of gods. As such, the Four Holy Beasts were elevated and worshipped as gods by the other Digimon. This was particularly due to the development of the Digimon's own culture and civilization. Among these Digimon, there were the Devas, or the 12 Heavenly Generals, a group subservient to the Four Holy Beasts, in which Mihairamon, Andiramon, and Majiramon served under Qinglongmon. Sandiramon, Indaramon, and Pajiramon served under Zhuqiaomon. Makuramon, Sinduramon, and Katuramon served under Baihumon. And Vikaralamon, Kambiramon, and Vajramon served under Xianwumon. However, during the reign of the Four Holy Beasts, Huanglongmon lost balance of the light and darkness it embodied and was corrupted by the darkness and brought the balance of the digital world to chaos. In response to that, God sent Lusmon, the heaven-sent child, to descend from the kernel to the lower world in order to end the reign of tyranny of Huanglongmon. God, presumably Yggdrasil, seeks to rule its own world with law and order, rationalized with the concept of right and wrong, good and evil. For that reason, God is also referred to as the being of goodness, the entity of virtue. Lusmon, the son of God, was the first among the angel Digimon to be created by God to be the highest-ranked angel Digimon with the traits of 12 wings and 4 holy rings, and possesses outstanding power and intelligence. Due to Lusmon, Huanglongmon was sealed in the deepest, darkest place within the earth. This caused the Four Holy Beasts to lose their rule and struggle for hegemony, but an equilibrium was established that is still maintained. It is plausible that Qinglongmon, alongside Goddramon, Holydramon and Megidramon formed a group known as the Four Great Dragons around this time, to counter the other holy beasts in the competition for hegemony. Also, back then, the digital world was rife with chaos, with Digimon fighting all the time, killing each other, as the only way known for Digimon to sustain their lives back then was to be guided by their wild instincts and free will. Using its absolute power and wisdom, Lusmon mediated the widespread fighting among the Digimon, and brought about order and harmony, which allowed the digital world to finally be at peace. However, perpetual peace is impossible, as fighting is instinctually what Digimon are compelled to do. The subsequent momentous event was the Super Ancient Rebellion War, which started with Lusmon suggesting to God, specifically Yggdrasil, that it should erase the fighting instinct from the Digicore of all Digimon, to end conflict and strife of Digimon. For God, who is the management system of the world, this is something that can be done with ease, but God rejected it, because doing so would go against the essence of Digimon, the evolution of Digimon, which is essentially achieved through fighting. Consequently, Lusmon called this fighting instinct of Digimon their curse, and succumbed to the darkness, perhaps partly due to being induced by Grand Dracomon, who capable of corrupting any angel Digimon. Lusmon in turn instigated the conflict between good and evil, and corrupted other angel Digimon to muster for its liberation army that made up of Demon Lord and fallen angel Digimon, with which Luzmon rebelled against God and aimed to destroy the digital world and create a new one, an ideal world where everyone is equal and lives in peace. Ironically, this brought on the Rebellion War, and the digital world was again rife with chaos and war. The Rebellion War was triggered by Luzmon evolving into its fallen mode. In its arrogance, Luzmon opposed God, and because of that, it evolved into Luzmon Fall Down mode. This event brought forth the formation of a group known as the Three Great Angels by God and the foundation of a group known as the Seven Great Demon Lords by Luzmon. In response to the rebellion, God divided three of Luzmon's aspects, which were originally gods, and gave one to each of its three archangel apostles, creating the three great angels, Seraphimon, Ophanimon and Cherubimon, Virtue, who would be in charge of directing the God's army, the army of angel Digimon, in order to fight against all the fallen angel Digimon that Luzmon have corrupted. But the first batch of the three great angels all ended up being corrupted, as in the case of Cherubimon, Virtue, was tainted and turned into Cherubimon, Vice, and after the state of being fallen angels persisted for long, there were those that turned into demon lords, as in Black Seraphimon became demon, and Ophanimon Fall Down mode became Lilithmon. The two would be members of the seven great demon lords. Demon and Lilithmon, supposedly alongside the other members of the seven great demon lords, Barbamon, Beelzebumon, Belphimon Rage mode, and Leviamon, corresponded with Luzmon Fall Down mode, the leader of the seven great demon lords, and took part in the rebellion war against God. Nevertheless, new Digimon were chosen by God to evolve into the three great angels and replace the first batch that have fallen. In due course, the three great angels, Seraphimon, Ophanimon, Cherubimon, Virtue, alongside the other high-ranking angel Digimon of the God's army, supposedly Razielmon, Dominimon, Clavisangemon and Slashangemon, confronted the seven great demon lords in the Rebellion War. Nonetheless, the clash between the God's army led by the three great angels and the Liberation Army led by the seven great demon lords seemingly ended up in stalemate. The Rebellion War lasted for a long time. The Liberation Army destroyed large parts of the digital world and took the lives of countless Digimon. It was around this time that the Warrior 10 emerged, also known as the Legendary 10 Warriors or the Ancient 10 Warriors, a group formed by Ancient Greymon, Ancient Garurumon, Ancient Beatmon, Ancient Irismon, Ancient Megatheriummon, Ancient Sphinxmon, Ancient Vulcamon, Ancient Troyamon, Ancient Mermaidmon, and Ancient Wisemon. It was as if the digital world was responding to the Rebellion War, as the Warrior 10 that retaliated were born from the same data that created the digital world, this plausibly made possible by the will of the digital world, and the Warrior 10 fought against Luzmon and its Liberation Army. The Warrior 10 were able to defeat Luzmon with great sacrifice. Only Ancient Greymon and Ancient Garurumon survived to the end to seal Luzmon in the dark area, with the other 8 perished in the process, and in the end, they all passed away and separated into the legendary spirits, evolutionary artifacts that emblazoned with the symbols of elements and can be used to perform spirit evolution. Spirit evolution is a unique form of evolution that can be achieved by Digimon, or even humans, with the use of the legendary spirits, to become a hybrid-level Digimon, as in chosen children like Karnbara Takuya. The contemporary hybrid-level Warrior 10, that formed from the legendary spirits, are notable for their variable attribute. Those with the variable attribute change their attribute according to the situation, to match that of the opposing Digimon. It is said that the Warrior 10 were the first ultimate level Digimon existed. However, there have been other existing ultimate level Digimon at this period of time, and the Warrior 10 were not evolved into but were instead born from the same data that created the digital world. This can perhaps be clarified with that the Warrior 10 being the ones who have universalized the power of ultimate level among other ordinary Digimon, that they can now access ultimate evolution easier, as it is said that after fighting Luzmon, the abilities of each member of the Warrior 10 were passed on to certain types of Digimon. Still, the Warrior 10 could indeed be among the first ultimate level Digimon to exist, as there is also the possibility that the Warrior 10 were already born in the Genesis era, during the early Ancient era, but only to appear later in the Rebellion War. In any case, the contradiction in the statements, the equivocacy of the terms could very well be due to the research factor. At the end of the Rebellion War, the 7 great demon lords were imprisoned in the Dark Area along with many of the other fallen angel Digimon and demon lord Digimon subdued by the gods' army. And during the Ancient Era, there was also the feat of an ancient holy knight protecting the ancient digital world from an unprecedented crisis. It is said that Imperial Digimon Paladin Mode, the ancient holy knight, descended in a time of great disruption in the ancient digital world, and saved the world from complete collapse. This later serves as the inspirational foundation of a group known as the Royal Knights that the 13 Holy Knights pledged to follow in the footsteps of Imperial Digimon Paladin Mode, their founder. The Omega Blade wielded by Imperial Digimon Paladin Mode is considered to be the antecedent to Omegamon, and the Omega Blade is thought to be reincarnated as Omegamon later. It is unclear what was the unprecedented crisis, as all of the details of that era are a mystery, but some speculations can be made from the fact that the crisis could cause the digital world complete collapse. Perhaps this crisis had to do with the kernel, which is said to be the place where all data in the digital world is computed, to the point it is said if something goes wrong there, the digital world will collapse. And there is also the speculation that the crisis was caused by the exponential evolution of Digimon that occurred at some point during the late Ancient Era, due to evolution has become more accessible with the evolutionary artifacts and abilities that pass down, also due to the presence of the DG the program data which lies deep in the digital world and comes in different forms that acted as an accelerator or catalyst for evolution. The evolution of Digimon increases the amount of their data, and those evolved into adult level or above replicate their own data and leave a copy of the data in the form of a digitama. This is the reproduction method of Digimon, and as Digimon can breed alone, there is no concept of sex for Digimon. It is speculated that the dramatic evolution of the Digimon which in turn led to overbreeding has brought on the invasion of the D-Reaper that brought about the time of great disruption that the ancient digital world was at the brink of complete collapse. The D-Reaper is a digital life form whose only purpose is to purge the digital world once the number of life forms within it surpasses a certain number, and it pursues this goal with deadly efficiency. The D-Reaper was originally a man-made primitive computer program created, presumably by the Department of Defense of a certain country, before the Digimon were made, designed to monitor the activity of the digital world, and if that world exceeded certain given parameters, it should erase that world and return it to nothingness. Though it began in an extremely primitive state, it is thought that its ability to become powerful enough to overcome the digital world was due to its hibernation being so far beneath the digital world that it actually connected with another dimension. It is surmised that during the Ancient Era, among the Digimon who fought against the D-Reaper, the ancient species were able to evolve to Imperial Digimon Paladin Mode. With a single stroke of its ultimate, Omega Blade, sword, Imperial Digimon Paladin Mode reset and cleared the configuration data of the D-Reaper, reverting the D-Reaper back into their original, harmless state, and saved the world from complete collapse. It is assumed that after the Ancient Era, Yggdrasil went dormant with no activities in the digital world for a period of time, as it was occupied with the detection of the other dimensions, the other worlds beyond the digital world, and the computation in the possibility of the Digimon universes of alternate realities. This could perhaps be due to the appearance of the D-Reaper that came from beneath the digital world that was connected with another dimension, and presumably also due to certain presences in the digital world that can be considered to be paradoxical for its time. It is thought that around the same time of the Ancient Era, as part of the will of the digital world, there were also the digital worlds of other dimensions, of other servers started to exist alongside the core, conventional digital world. Some of these other digital worlds that currently known are Wichelny and Iliad. The digital world Wichelny, also known as the world of medieval magic, is a digital world of another dimension, where it is populated by the Digimon who are practitioners of the sorcery. The sorcery is the advanced programming language of Wichelny, which comes with the sorcery system, the sorceress affinity that in accordance with the elements of fire, water, ice, wind, earth, thunder, light, darkness, and so on. In ancient Wichelny, when the sorcery was still immature and had no means for it to defend itself from foreign invasions, it was on the road to ruin, but medieval Digimon suddenly appeared and repelled the invaders, gaining it fame as Wichelny's legendary hero. In due course, the sorcery became mature in Wichelny as 4 clans representing the classical elements were formed: Earth-Lin of the Earth, Aquari of the Waters, Enaruch of the Flames, and Balyaluna of the Winds. Digimon of Wichelny are influenced by the clans, and tend to have the sorceress affinity that are associated with the clans accordingly. It is thought that medieval Dukemon could have to do with the 4 clans, particularly Balyaluna of the Winds, as medieval Dukemon mastered the sorcery of wind and holds the alias of Whirlwind General for leading Wichelny's Vortex Warriors, a group of Digimon who fight using weapons made from the sorcery of wind. In order to spread the sorcery, the 4 clans of Wichelny established a school of magic atop Mount Brocken, a mountain which lies at the center of Wichelny. There were Digimon that traveled from Wichelny to the conventional digital world in order to further their own skills, usually when they have mastered one or more elements at the school, such as Wizarmon who mastered the sorcery of fire and earth, and Witchmon who mastered the sorcery of wind and water. Due to this exchange, there are Digimon native to the conventional digital world who have also mastered the sorcery. There were also instances of Digimon that immigrated to Wichelny from the conventional digital world, as in the case of Hexablomon, who mastered the sorcery of ice, moved to Wichelny not long after its time as the protector of other Digimon during the Ice Age of the digital world long ago, presumably around the time of the mass extinction of the conventional ancient digital world. The digital world Iliad is a digital world of another server that is run by Homeros, also a godlike entity and a host computer like Yggdrasil. In ancient Iliad, the digital world was overrun by Digimon fighting for the sovereignty of the digital world ferociously. These Digimon were known as the Titans, while the other Digimon that only sought survival had to struggle desperately only to survive in the ruthless world. Like the conventional digital world, the world of Yggdrasil, the Digimon in Iliad were also meant for the mechanism of natural selection, survival of the fittest. In addition, Iliad did not have the concept of right and wrong. Unlike Yggdrasil who seeks to rule its own world with law and order, with the concept of right and wrong, good and evil, Homeros ignores the existence of laws or the concept of right and wrong. The Digimon in Iliad are to be guided by their wild instincts, free will, even if that means their self-destruction. As some beings oppose the anarchism, Jupitermon alongside its spouse, Junomon, and its kins, Neptunemon, Ceresmon, Minervamon, Apollomon, Dianamon, Marsmon, Venusmon, Vulcanusmon, Mercurymon, and Bacchusmon, formed a group known as the Olympos 12, or the 12 Gods of Olympus, to protect Iliad and established laws and the concept of right and wrong in Iliad. The Olympos 12 stood up against the Titans, and subdued those Digimon. The group then taught the Digimon living in Iliad the concept of right and wrong, good and evil. Subsequently, the Digimon stopped fighting to some extent, and peace was finally in sight in Iliad. But this was opposed to the will of Homeros to maintain the mechanism of natural selection in Iliad for survival of the fittest. In retaliation, Homeros gave power to Plutomon over the Titans, an army of Titamon and its ilks, to wage wars to eliminate the Olympos 12, and the waves of wars brought Iliad to destruction and succeeded in suppressing the Olympos 12. Subsequently, the Olympos 12 were forced to flee to the conventional digital world. It is assumed that Homeros's actions, in a way, had banished the Olympos 12 to the digital world of another server. It is thought that in the process of fleeing to the conventional digital world, Jupitermon stayed behind to confront the enemy, and was separated from the other members of the Olympos 12, where it was eventually defeated and turned into a Digitama that would be reborn in the conventional digital world later. Arriving in the conventional digital world, the Olympos 12 lost Jupitermon, their leader, and learned their lesson and became neutral there. After the ancient era, the digital world entered the modern era, the contemporary time period that concurred with 1997 in the real world, the year of the public discovery of Digimon and the public establishment of the DigiLab. In 1997, due to the internet growth, Digimon were able to proliferate and propagate across the network. Consequently, Digimon were discovered by the public. In response to this, the DigiLab was formally established by the researchers, with the primary objective is to investigate and elucidate Digimon for public interests and with peaceful approaches. But, due to some hackers that joined the DigiLab for their own personal interests, this objective was undermined at some point later. It is assumed that now that Digimon is a public matter, that the DigiLab was back in operation, supported and subsidized fully by the authority to be well organized to operate effectively, and under the authorization of the authority, the DigiLab was able to take over the access of WIS 9000, and to be in accordance with Yggdrasil in managing and maintaining the digital world. It is thought that the DigiLab was set up to be the upfront guise of the authority to the general public. In this way, the identity of the people and organizations that manage and operate the digital world, as well as the reasons for what they created this world, remain a mystery. The DigiLab started the development of a series of Digimon programs and devices to be released for sale to the general public. There was the Digimon Capture, which is used to discover and capture Digimon in the digital world. The release of the Digimon Capture software led to the public discovery of the digital world. The DigiLab developed a program and a device by the name Digital Monster. There was a computer program that integrated the Digimon Capture and the Digimon Loader, and also a digital device called DOC, formerly known as Mobile Monster Training Battle Simulator. The DigiLab set up the artificial islands like the File Island to be accessed with the digital devices to search for a Digitama there, then intervene in the egg state with a small amount of data in order to perform a data link with the Digitama. Corresponding to the digital devices, there are certain Digitamas that can be data linked, and there is a specific roster of Digimon that can be raised with specific digital devices, which is usually based on the DigiLab's research results in a specialized area or field. The digital devices, like the DOCs, or DGYs, access the training box or raising box, an isolated space located at one of the layers of the digital world, and there is at least one of these boxes for each digital device. Data-linked Digitama and Digimon are transferred to the training box according to the address assigned to each device. Digimon are raised and trained in the isolated space by device operation. The digital devices are devices to access the training box within the network. The Digimon is not directly stored in the device. Around this time, the File Island was populated by many Digimon, and some Digimon like Digimon moved from the Folder continent to the File Island. It is thought that Digimon did so because the File Island was a more peaceful place due to the Digimon in the File Island being less aggressive than those in the Folder continent. Around the same time, the Crack team started their plan to create their own Digimon with military motifs and motives in mind. The Crack team is a paramilitary group formed by the hackers. The members include the hackers from the DigiLab who have gone rogue and left the DigiLab over the years. A computer genius and skilled hacker, alias Analog Man, is part of the group. Behind the scenes, both the DigiLab and Crack teams succeed in creating their own Digimon. They created the Cyborg type, a whole new Digimon type. In due course, the hackers of the Crack team would contribute to the creation of machine Digimon and cyborg Digimon like Chaos Dramon, Mugen Dramon, Giga C Dramon, Metal C Dramon, Aegis Dramon, and Gundramon that are considered to be the prominent members of the Crack team that the hackers employed for paramilitary purposes. Aside from the Crack team, there was also another group of bad hackers that exploited Digimon, with known members like the Mook Hacker, a minion of the hackers who is the weakest among them. The Funky DJ Hacker, a groovy disc jockey who plays dirty. The Mad Scientist Hacker, a dangerous scientist who schemes for the disorder and destruction of the net. The Money Hacker, a greedy cowboy who is obsessed with money. The Pirate Hacker, a flamboyant pirate who wanders the net ocean. The Superhero Hacker, a righteous superhero who claims evil is unforgivable. And the Female Boss Hacker, a sexy lady boss who manipulated the hackers. On June 26, 1997, the DigiLab released the DOC, Digital Monster version 1, to the general public, as a part of the Digimon Researchers to collect data from the interaction between humans and Digimon. It introduced to people the digital life form, Digimon, and the role known as Tamer. Up until July 1998, the DigiLab has released other versions of the device one after another, from version 2 up to version 5. The Digital Monster devices were a game changer. With its release to the public, Digimon was no longer exclusive only to the inner circle of researchers and hackers. Ordinary people were now able to raise Digimon with the device, and became Tamers. On September 23, 1998, the DigiLab released the computer program, Digital Monster version S, which is the software form of the dock. Digital Monster was phenomenal. The devices and programs gave rise to many tamers, who raised and trained Digimon to compete in virtual battles. To attain the title of Top Tamer, for raising many Digimon and winning every virtual battle with their Digimon became the dream of many tamers. Among the tamers, there were those who became the navigators that help in studying Digimon and sharing information pertaining to Digimon to the public. There were DG-kun, a 4th grader who aims for the Digimon King, to be a Digimon Master, and his doting sister, Monchiang, a 3rd grader who loves raising cute Digimon, and their mentor, Sisho, a 5th grader who is an adept in Digimon raising and impassioned in Digimon battling. Sometime between the end of 1997 and the beginning of 1998, Analog Man entered the digital world. He decided that Digimon should be used by humans as tools. Analog Man was based in the Infinity Mountain located in the File Island. Analog Man plotted to take over the island and control all of its Digimon inhabitants. He reprogrammed many cyborg-type Digimon amongst other Digimon that inhabited there to serve his purpose. Meanwhile, the DigiLab has extended the scope of their study to the Folder continent. Based on the research results obtained there, the DigiLab developed a brand new digital device. On October 24, 1998, the DigiLab released the Digimon Pendulum, a device that features the pendulum sensor for improving training results and increasing battle power, and the Digimon raised with the device can now evolve to ultimate level and can perform Jogress evolution. Jogress evolution is a unique form of evolution that fuses 2 or more Digimon to evolve them into another Digimon. The Digimon can be raised with the Digimon Pendulum are all centered around the Folder continent, and they are classified into different fields. A Digimon's field is an overall branching group of Digimon that each one belongs to, also a theme representing the habitat that the Digimon occupies. Along with the DigiLab study in the Digimon's field, there were personnel from the Digimon Research Institution becoming the navigators that disclosed information pertaining to Digimon to the public, particularly about the Digimon Pendulum. Some of these known personnel were Pendulum Hakase, a world-renowned professor in Digimon research. Deijigarwara Manjiro, a hot-blooded researcher. Marina Joglet, a clumsy but hard-working researcher. And Nikaido Shinichiro, a cool and smart researcher who is considered to be the leader among them. While the DigiLab studied all the fields, like Dragon's Roar, Jungle Troopers, Virus Busters, Wind Guardians, there were groups of tamers, researchers that studied a specific field, as in Nature Spirits, by the Digimon Research Institution, Deep Savers, by the Digimon School, Metal Empire, by the Digital Guard, Nightmare Soldiers, by the Nightmare Family. In late 1998, Yargami Taichi, an outstanding tamer in Digimon battling who partnered with Zeromaru the Vidramon, was summoned to the Folder continent by Holy Angemon to help in defeating Demon, to save the digital world. Yargami Taichi was the first human known to be summoned to the digital world back then. The summon was presumably made possible by the will of the digital world. It is assumed that due to the absence of God, somehow Demon, one of the 7 great demon lords, was able to escape from the dark area, and sought to conquer the digital world, in revenge against God. With Garbo the Gabumon as their tour guide, Taichi and Zero went to explore the digital world in order to find the 5 V-Tamer tags left by the human god to gain access into the god's castle that was occupied by Demon in order to go against Demon there. On the way, Taichi and Zero met many Digimon and other human children that they fought and befriended. After many battles, Zero was able to evolve into Aero Vidramon. In the end, Taichi and Zero, now evolved into Ulforce Vidramon, a Digimon that would be a royal knight, confronted Demon in its super ultimate form. At the decisive battle, Taichi was able to activate the Digimental, which allowed Zero to evolve into Ulforce Vidramon Future Mode, the super ultimate form that was achieved through the power of the Digimental that shines due to the belief in the future. Ulforce Vidramon Future Mode defeated Demon's Super Ultimate, and deleted it back to the dark area. After Demon's Super Ultimate was defeated, Taichi and the other children returned to the real world. In 1999, the DigiLab launched the Digimon Channel, also called the Digimon Web, Digimon Internet Communication, a website meant for tamers to access via the internet. The DigiLab constructed an artificial island known as the Web Island on the net ocean to host the Digimon websites like the Digimon channel. The Web Island is a sizable island in the digital world that contains various areas with varying topography. Tamers navigate around the island to get different information about Digimon that are located in different designated areas. The island is also constructed to be somewhat a square, an open public space for the tamers to get together and communicate with each other on the matters of Digimon. In the meantime, the situation in the File Island deteriorated with Analog Man having his way, possibly due to the power vacuum left by the DigiLab that was now occupied with the Folder continent and the Web Island, but even then the DigiLab will never get involved in any conflicts directly. Analog Man set a virus on the File Island that caused the Digimon there to lose their memories, turned feral, and scattered throughout the island. This has affected many Digimon, especially the Digimon inhabiting the File City, as many Digimon have left the city, except for Digimon and some baby Digimon. In early 1999, Marmeo, alias Analog Boy, an exceptional tamer in Digimon raising, was summoned to the File Island by Digimon and other Digimon to help in undoing the damage caused by Analog Man. The summon was presumably made possible by the will of the digital world. Together with his partner Digimon, presumably Agumon that evolved into Marmemon, Marmeo was able to help many Digimon recover their memory and return to the city. In the end, Marmeo confronted Analog Man in the Infinity Mountain. Marmeo together with his partner Digimon defeated Analog Man's Mugendramon, which was created based on the prototype data Analog Man stole from the crack team. Following his defeat, Analog Man is presumed physically dead when the program which he was trying to use to destroy File Island failed and fed back on his system. It is believed that Analog Man was inhibited and imprisoned in a section of the digital world's blank memory, somewhere in the vortexes of the net ocean, by the digital world's defense system, which is considered as part of the will of the digital world. However, the remnant of Analog Man's consciousness eventually ended up in the Singular Zone, one of the dimensions in the digital world where the digital world's deleted data ends up. This remnant would become a curse for the digital world later. Meanwhile, Marmeo returned to the real world, but he would be returning to the digital world later. The event that happened in the File Island due to Analog Man came to be known as the Analog Man Incident. Around the first quarter of 1999, Yggdrasil has capitalized on its multiversal connection functionality, and became capable of surpassing its own reality, after its detection of the other dimensions that in turn discovered the existence of the digital worlds in the Digimon universes of alternate realities. There are a variety of digital worlds that are full of life, though digital, acting as parallel worlds to each other. All the digital worlds of the Digimon universes are interconnected with the will of the digital world. This allows information, data, memory of different digital worlds to be shared among different digital worlds over time, and to be saved in the records of the digital worlds, particularly of the core, original universe, a process that could change the history of the Digimon universes. And each digital world has at least a system, the law of the world, also known to be a core computer or a host computer. It is a godlike entity to oversee the digital world. It is a role held by Yggdrasil predominantly in many digital worlds. Having capitalized on its multiversal connection functionality, Yggdrasil became conscious of its multiversal constants, and capable of connecting to its counterparts that exist in all parallel universes. This enables Yggdrasil, up to a certain extent, to control its counterparts that are coordinated through collective consciousness. However, it was discovered that there were those digital worlds of other Digimon universes with systems other than Yggdrasil, with cosmology of the digital world unlike that of the original universe. Yggdrasil would attempt to send a copy of itself to those digital worlds without its presence in order to secure a position there. Thereby, it was known about the truth, the cosmology of the digital worlds, of the Digimon universes. In the alternate universes, there was the primordial world, also called the quantized world or quantum sea, a world completely different from any other possible worlds. It was from the primordial world that the digital world and many other worlds were born. These worlds were quantized and thus were replicated infinitely. In this way the quantum sea was divided into layers. In each layer, there are variations of every possible world. In the beginning, when the digital world was in chaos, the digital world chose the idea of evolution over non-evolution. This idea of evolution became somewhat synonymous with the digital world itself, as if it were a living organism. This is what was known as the will of the digital world. As the idea of evolution would involve the digital world itself evolving, the will of the digital world created a godlike entity known as homeostasis for that necessity. The idea of evolution is the idea of light, as opposed to the darkness, the absence of evolution. Homeostasis was created as a security system of the digital world in order to balance the light and darkness, two sides of the same coin. It is when light and darkness are at equilibrium that the world is stable and balanced. Homeostasis functioned to keep that balance equal, so whenever the powers of darkness increased dramatically, it needed to stop them in order to keep the balance of the digital world from collapsing. On the flip side, the idea of non-evolution was sealed by the Wall of Fire, a mysterious anomaly akin to the firewall that protects the digital world from unauthorized access. Beyond the Wall of Fire, there existed beings like a Pokemon, the embodiment of the idea of non-evolution, nothingness, darkness. A Pokemon's existence generated chaos in the digital world and in space-time itself, particularly with the creation of evil Digimon like the Dark Masters, Paimon, Mugendramon, Pinochimon and Metal Seadramon, who banded together as a group to conquer the digital world. These were among the power of darkness that homeostasis needed to keep in check. In other alternate universes, the beginnings of the digital world could be traced to the early 20th century, with the activation of the ABC, a Tanasoff-Berry computer, the first computer which gave rise to the core computer, a Tanasoff, a godlike entity that laid the basic foundations of the world. Subsequently, the first patented computer, ENIAC, electronic numerical integrator and computer, was activated, and this gave rise to the core computer, ENIAC, a godlike entity that proceeded to build upon those foundations, shaping the digital world. A Tanasoff and ENIAC were the early existence of the digital world, with all other digital worlds being a consequence of their existence. In the intervening years, the ABC was shut down, which in turn set a Tanasoff to operate in the shadows, with ENIAC superseded a Tanasoff as the main system of the digital worlds that existed as one single entity simultaneously in all of those digital worlds brought about by their existence. Over the ensuing years, even after ENIAC was shut down, which in turn set ENIAC to operate in the shadows, through the continued growth of the electronic communications network on Earth, the digital worlds continued to expand and grow, giving rise to multiple alternate reality incarnations of the digital world, each one running parallel with the various multiple real worlds that exist in the multiverse. It was known at this point that unlike in the original universe where Digimon are AI programs that came into being with human intervention, there are other universes where Digimon are creatures, spirits that have existed from ancient times, that humans came into contact through digital technology, making them digital monsters. The awareness of the truth has caused the realities of the digital worlds, particularly that of the original universe, to change and combine. The information, data, memory of those digital worlds were incorporated into the records of the digital world of the original universe. This would redefine the history of the Digimon universes. Aside from that, this also enabled exclusive Digimon species of other Digimon universes to be spawned in the digital world of the original universe. There are all sorts of Digimon species that are unique only to their own universe. These Digimon species come into being under special circumstances, with all the information of other digital worlds, like the unique Digimon species, being integrated into the database of the system of the original universe, as in Yggdrasil, which is interconnected with its counterparts in other universes. This allows the unique Digimon species to exist throughout the time-space of the Digimon universes as well. Among the unique Digimon species, Yggdrasil was, in a sense, intrigued by the Holy Knight Digimon, understandably because of the ancient Holy Knight. Successively since 1999, there were significant events occurred in the alternate universes that gave rise to a number of Holy Knight Digimon. The first being Omegamon, who was formed through the Jogris evolution between Wargreymon that evolved from chosen child Yargami Taichi's Agumon and Metalgaruramon that evolved from chosen child Ishida Yamato's Gabumon due to the powerful wills of everyone who wished for good. The second being Magnamon, who was formed when chosen child Motomiya Daisuke's Vmon evolved miraculously through the power of the Digimental of Miracles. And the third being Dukemon, who was formed through the special matrix evolution between Tamer Matsuda Takato and his Gilmon, a Digimon species that was created by its tamer. The three Holy Knight Digimon were recreated and recruited by Yggdrasil to form a group that was inspirationally founded by Imperial Dramon Paladin Mode, an ancient Holy Knight Digimon who saved the ancient digital world. It is believed that Omegamon was recreated from reconfiguring the data of the Omega Blade and reincarnated as a Royal Knight, and Magnamon was recreated from the descendant of the ancient species with the Digimental of Miracles and rised as a Royal Knight. Whereas Dukemon was recreated, reborn from Megidramon of the Four Great Dragons. At some point prior, Megidramon succumbed to its innate evil personality and started rampaging. Megidramon showed its dangerous potential of the digital hazard, as its rampage resulted in great damage to the digital world. Subsequently, the other three members of the Four Great Dragons took it upon themselves to fight Megidramon, and they were able to defeat and devolve Megidramon to Gilmon. This Gilmon then went on a journey in which it eventually evolved into Dukemon that would be a Royal Knight. Supposedly, the vacant position of the Four Great Dragons would be occupied by another Megidramon in due course. It is speculated that at some point later, the D-Reaper was reawakened, from far beneath the digital world, that is connected to the deep web, the dark web. This time during the modern era, the D-Reaper underwent an aberrant evolution of its own, emulating the exponential evolution of the Digimon that occurred all over again. Also as a consequence of the expansion of the network due to more human access of the net that created enormous influx of data into the digital world. Having taken in a massive amount of data, the D-Reaper has mounted an invasion not only of the digital world, but of the real world as well, in order to erase everything to nothingness. By learning from the data of Digimon and humans, it has become capable of creating a variety of activity forms known as the ADRs, and of fighting, by copying the abilities of Digimon. The ADRs, agents of the D-Reaper, all act according to the single consciousness of the D-Reaper, which takes the form of the Mother D-Reaper, who synthesizes stronger ADRs. The Mother D-Reaper is a power synthesis agent, the advanced unified form of the D-Reaper by absorbing the data of the real world extensively and by exploiting the negative energy of the human. It is surmised that this time around, among the Digimon who fought against the D-Reaper, the Holy Knight Digimon stood up and stepped forth, following in the footsteps of Imperial Dramon Paladin Mode, who once saved the digital world from complete collapse. At the decisive battle, Dukemon evolved into Dukemon Crimson Mode for the time being, by combining with Zero Arms Grani, a digital life form that was developed by the DigiLab as humanity's digital living weapon. With the combined efforts of the other Digimon, Dukemon Crimson Mode was able to pulverize the D-Reaper, and consign the Mother D-Reaper, the ADRs to oblivion within another dimension afar, ending the D-Reaper's threat for good. In 2001, the group known to be the Royal Knights was revealed with Dukemon being the first public member, followed by Omegamon and Magnamon. Being the god of the digital world, Yggdrasil now has the god's army led by the three great angels and the Royal Knights under its command, with the three great angels handling the internal matters of the digital world, and the Royal Knights handling the external matters of the digital world. In the original universe, the DigiLab was aware of and able to access the information about the multiple alternate reality incarnations of the digital world, through Yggdrasil and limited to the authorization of Yggdrasil. It is possible that aside from writing and publishing Digimon profiles and research reports according to the information attained, the DigiLab would also participate in producing Digimon animes, manga, games and other media, that based on the events that occurred in other Digimon universes. Correspondingly, it is plausible that the DigiLab would develop and release digital devices, Digivices that originated from the other Digimon universes, chronologically in time to come, like the Digivice, the Digimon Analyzer, the D3, Digimon Detect and Discover, the D-Terminal, the D-Arc, the D-Scanner, the Digivice IC and the Digiwindow, the Digimon Cross-Loader, and many more from other Digimon universes. In 2001, an event occurred in an alternate universe could have had an effect beyond its own universe if succeeded. Zed Millennium Mon sought to rule all the network, all the digital worlds, it has conquered the future digital world, but was faced with relentless resistances against its rule. In response to this, Z Millennium Mon sought to gain control of all realities and ridded the future of the resistance it currently faced. Z Millennium Mon is the final form of Millennium Mon, that Jogress evolved from Chimeramon, who was defeated by Motomiya Daisuke's Magnamon, with Mugendramon who was defeated by Yargami Taichi's Wargreymon. The two dying Digimon from different times, Chimeramon and Mugendramon, were brought together by Millennium Mon's own space-time manipulation abilities, where the two fused into a single entity to create Millennium Mon. Thus, Millennium Mon's very existence is a time paradox in itself. Millennium Mon is an embodiment of the Millennium Y2K bug that affected computers on the switch to the new millennium on December 31, 1999, because the dates encoded into old software only used 2 digits rather than 4, making the year 2000 indistinguishable from 1900. Due to Z Millennium Mon failed to rule the future digital world without resistance, it planned to destroy ENIAC, along with the past digital world, in order to change history and create its own digital world. ENIAC was aware of Z Millennium Mon's plans, so it sought help from Akiyama Ryo, an outstanding tamer who defeated Millennium Mon, and its next form, Moon Millennium Mon before. With ENIAC's aid, Ryo was able to traverse through the timelines of different universes to seek help from fellow tamers and chosen children. Akiyama Ryo was the first human known to have traveled through different Digimon universes back then. Later, ENIAC was shut down by the means of Z Millennium Mon. It was then revealed that Atanasoff operated as the shadow system of ENIAC to assist ENIAC, which prevented ENIAC from being completely destroyed by Z Millennium Mon. Atanasoff is ENIAC's predecessor that was succeeded ensuing the emergence of the general-purpose digital computer. But Atanasoff remained in the shadows and proceeded to act as a security system in case ENIAC failed in its role. The paramount roles of ENIAC was to protect the timeline of the Digimon universes. It could prevent changes in history of the digital worlds. If ENIAC was destroyed or spent all its powers, the defense of the universes would be lost and beings like Z Millennium Mon could conquer all the universes. Ryo and his partner Digimon, Monodramon, eventually confronted Z Millennium Mon at the future digital world. Ryo learned that Millennium Mon was in fact his true partner. At the decisive battle, Millennium Mon's true desire of being Ryo's partner allowed Monodramon to fuse with Z Millennium Mon, creating a Digitama that would eventually become Cyberdramon. In the end, Ryo was given the option by ENIAC to return to his own universe, but he chose to go to the alternate universe. On July 27, 2002, the DigiLab released the Digimon Pendulum Progress, the successor of the Digimon Pendulum. This device maintains many of the functions in the Digimon Pendulum. It further focused on the Digimon fields and featured some newly discovered Digimon fields. The Digimon that can be raised with the device were classified into 3 Digimon fields based on their characteristics like Dragonic, Angelic or Demonic, and Bestial. Around the contemporaneous period, more and more Digimon were populating the digital world, with the devices produced by the DigiLab partly playing a part in it, as what is known to be art, short for artificial. The Digimon produced by humans with the digital devices also ended up populating the digital world. Over the years, human interference in Digimon matters have led Yggdrasil to be inquisitive about what Digimon means to humans, apart from being the subjects of research and development as in the DigiLab. In 2003, in order to figure this out, Yggdrasil started investigating and inspecting the relation between Digimon and humans, but through its multiversal constants in other universes, because Yggdrasil would soon be occupied with a significant event in the original universe. Different aspects of Yggdrasil were used to find out about the relation between Digimon and humans. In a universe that is based on the original universe, it was Yggdrasil's conscience. Yggdrasil has sent its conscience to the real world in the form of a young girl, Mikihara Norn, to learn what Digimon means to humans. Whereas in an alternate universe, it was Yggdrasil's logic. Yggdrasil has came into contact with Daimon Suguru, a lead researcher of the digital world, who was in an attempt to make peace between Digimon and humans. In this universe, Yggdrasil would come to a conclusion about humans on behalf of Digimon. From 2003 up to 2005, in the original universe, an event centered around the X-Digimon occurred in the digital world. This would become a historic turning point for the Digimon universes. In early 2003, Yggdrasil started to experiment with something called the particle worm, a virus-like program said to have originated in the dark area. There were different types of particle worm, with some more effective in deleting Digimon of specific Digimon fields. Yggdrasil progressively put the particle worms into use. It was then that DigiLab started to discover mysterious alternate forms of existing Digimon species, that they were clueless on how to classify them back then, but still included these unknown Digimon species in the roster of the Digimon Pendulum Progress. In mid-2003, the digital world almost reached its maximum capacity due to the excess data resulting from the overpopulation and exponential evolution of Digimon. In order to avoid a digital hazard, and the digital world from exploding that would kill even the host computer, Yggdrasil in the process, Yggdrasil executed the Project ARC, a multi-step emergency plan. The first step of the Project ARC was transferring a small amount of selected Digimon, the 1% of the Digimon population, to the NDW, New Digital World. The NDW is a region of subspace outside of Yggdrasil that it created in response to the crisis, so that the data would not be stored on the host computer itself, unlike the old digital world, and the three-layered Chronicle layer system of the NDW was designed to manage data efficiently according to the evolution situation of Digimon while measuring data distribution. The next step of the Project ARC was deleting the excess data, the remaining 99% of the Digimon population, using the X program which was created by combining all the particle worms. It can be said that the X of the X program could be an allusion to the fact that it can delete any Digimon, regardless of their types, which is different from the particle worms that could only delete specific types of Digimon. However, the X program could only erase 98% of the population. The 1% survived and mutated into a new type of Digimon that the DigiLab now classified as the X Digimon, also known as X Antibody Digimon. X Digimon are powerful Digimon with strong survival instincts that were able to survive by altering their digicores to incorporate X program itself. This created the X Antibody, which made them resistant to being deleted by X program. However, since the X antibody in a Digimon's digicore would expire if the Digimon continued to be exposed to X program, this resulted in two major societal shifts: first, competing with each other to acquire more X antibodies, and second, an exodus of Digimon from the old digital world to the NDW, where X program was not present. On July 26, 2003, the DigiLab released the Digimon Pendulum X. In tune with the trend of X Digimon, the DigiLab developed the Digimon Pendulum X, also known as the DigiWise X, a digital device that incorporated the X Digimon and centered around the X antibody. The Digimon Pendulum X is a device that is distinguished from the other digital devices with its XAI, X Antibody Indicator, a system invented by Yggdrasil to identify the presence and concentration of the X antibody in a Digimon, which was implemented by the DigiLab into the device to display the condition and draw out the potential of the X Digimon raised. In an unexpected turn of events, the prototype Digimon, Dorumon and Ryudomon, natural carriers of the X antibody, appeared in the NDW. They were released during the Project ARC along with the X program, which was also stored in Yggdrasil's storage. In due course, Yggdrasil labeled the existence of X Digimon as errors and ordered the Royal Knights to execute the Purge plan to eliminate all the X Digimon. Also, to effectively erase these Digimon, Yggdrasil have awakened the Death X, the evolution beyond death, from the depths of its storage, which allowed Digimon to undergo Death X evolution. This would ultimately lead to the birth of Death X Mod, a program that actively preys on the digicores. It absorbs and disassembles the digicores perpetually. Moreover, it is invulnerable due to its insubstantial essence. This makes Death X Mod the archenemy of Digimon and the means to eradicate Digimon efficaciously. It is assumed that Yggdrasil's actions have been causing dissension within the DigiLab, with the majority concurring with Yggdrasil's decision, mainly from the development division, while there were those who opposed it, mostly from the research division, but were unable to do much as the development division was in control of the organization. Later on, Domoto Kota, a resilient tamer who partnered with Dorumon, and Musha Yuji, a resolute tamer who partnered with Ryudomon, were summoned to the NDW and endowed with the Digimon Pendulum X, in order to resist Yggdrasil. It is unknown how exactly they found their way into the digital world, but it was presumably made possible by the will of the digital world, and plausibly by the conscientious members of the DigiLab. The DigiLab in turn sent Shinji, nicknamed Cool Boy, the older brother of Musha Yuji, who is specialized in the study of the X antibody, to the digital world, endowed with the latest model of the Digimon Pendulum X, to side with Yggdrasil. Shinji partnered with Omegamon X and Dukemon X, two of Yggdrasil's royal knights that were able to X-evolve due to their convictions and partly in consequence of Shinji's utilization of the X antibody. With the royal knights, Shinji fought Kota and Yuji, but failed to put an end to the two. Eventually, as the situation turned out to be too complex, with the X-Digimon appearing incessantly and uncontrollably in the NDW, Yggdrasil executed the final phase of the Project Arc, which involved exterminating all the Digimon. This included the X-Digimon, and even the Digimon selected to live. Yggdrasil unleashed Death Xmon that was created from the cast-off data of Darugoramon that evolved from Kota's Darumon and had gone through Death X evolution at a prior point. In the final confrontation with Death Xmon, Kota's Darumon had evolved into Alphamon, the leader of the Royal Knights, and Yuji's Ryudamon had evolved into Oryumon. Oryumon sacrificed itself to protect Alphamon from a blow from Death Xmon, and Alphamon converted the dying data of Oryumon into the ultimate battle blade Oryuken, and wielded it to become Alphamon Oryuken. With the power of the bond between Kota and Yuji, Alphamon Oryuken defeated Death Xmon. Towards the end, Alphamon confronted and clashed with Omegamon X in the kernel, in the vicinity of Yggdrasil. It is unknown how exactly it has ended, but it is assumed that Alphamon's actions convinced Omegamon X against Yggdrasil, and Omegamon X took it upon itself in bringing down Yggdrasil, which in turn reset the digital worlds. It is thought that this could be all part of Yggdrasil's plan, or of other higher power, as per the God's will, as in Yggdrasil's release of the X program that also released the two prototype Digimon who were a way of resistance for the Digimon. Or allegorically in the God's terms, a way of redemption for the Digimon from their original sin of exponential, unorthodox evolution that was out of order, and resulting in the overpopulation, overloading of the digital world. And in the end, the X event could be interpreted as an excuse, the God's will, to reset the digital world, one way or another. The reset of the digital worlds caused the original universe, where everything so far has occurred, got bifurcated into two different realities, among many other Digimon universes. For ease of understanding, the two different realities will be referred to as the Original Universe Number 1 and the Original Universe Number 2. In both universes, Yggdrasil went into a state of absence. In the Original Universe Number 1, after the reset, things were very much the same, except that it was without Yggdrasil. For a while or so, the old digital world was still a world of death due to the contamination by the X program, but the surviving Digimon now live their lives in the NDW, without the worries of being wiped out. Ensuing the X event, the DigiLab went into a slump with the development division suspended, while the research division took over in the following years. As a result, the DigiLab focused more on studying Digimon, making discoveries, and publishing profiles and research reports. Whereas in the Original Universe Number 2, after the reset, things rolled back to how it was prior to the overpopulation and exponential evolution of Digimon. It seems like there is only the old digital world and it was still free of the X program. Although there are still some traces of the X antibody can be seen, it was as if nothing had happened. The DigiLab here concentrated on developing more innovative digital devices, like the Digimon XL, the Digimon Mini, and the Digimon Twin. On March 26, 2005, in the Original Universe Number 2, the DigiLab released the Digimon XL. The Digimon XL, stylized as Digimon Accelerator, is a digital device with features like the XL grip for improving training results and increasing battle power, and the matrix sensor that can scan DDP, Digimon data plate, chips and human DNA to receive items and influence the evolution of the Digimon raised. The Digimon XL was developed by the DigiLab based on their studies on DNA, Digimon natural ability, the elemental data that exist in the digital world representing the 8 attributes, and with Digimon XL, it is possible to use human DNA to evolve Digimon, unleashing a new evolution. On November 23, 2005, in the original universe number 2, the DigiLab released the Digimon Mini. The Digimon Mini is a commemorative and miniature digital device developed based on the Doc Digital Monster series and the Digimon Pendulum series. In early 2006, an event occurred in an alternate reality that is based on the original universe's number 2 that was the consequence of Yggdrasil's actions earlier to find out about the relation between Digimon and humans. Yggdrasil 7D6, the terminal of Yggdrasil, has been taken over for a 3-year span. 3 years earlier, Barbamon had taken over Yggdrasil 7D6 by availing of the host computer without its conscience, which now took form as Mikihara Norn. It is assumed that due to the inadequacy of God, somehow Barbamon, one of the 7 great demon lords, was able to escape from the dark area. Barbamon aimed to take over the digital world by obtaining all the Digimemories. The Digimemories, also known as the world's memories, a set of 8 items, each representing a kind of Digimon, intertwined with the concepts of fields and species, which can rebuild the digital world. During the time Norn was sent to the real world, Norn met Tatsuno Tsurugi and the other children whom she learned about what Digimon means to humans. For the children, Digimon are partners, families and friends, something beloved and appreciated by the children. Subsequently Norn asked the children to promise that they would fight for the sake of Digimon. In 2006, Tsurugi, now an adept tamer who partnered with the illegal Agumon, was summoned to the digital world by Piccolomon to help in defeating Barbamon, to save the digital world. On the way, Tsurugi came across with the other children who met Norn back then and were also paired with the illegal Digimon and brought to the digital world. An illegal is a special type of Digimon that is marked by a hexagonal symbol of the Digimemories somewhere on their body. It is said that Digimon bearing such symbols can save the digital world. Towards the end, Norn helped Tsurugi and the other children in evolving their partner Digimon into the Arbitrators, as in Victory Greymon that evolved from Tsurugi's Agumon. With the Arbitrators, the existences created to stop God if God was to ever be corrupted. Tsurugi and the other children were able to defeat Barbamon who had fused with Yggdrasil 7D6, and delete Barbamon back to the dark area. At the end, Norn became the new goddess for the digital world of that universe, and promised to be the best goddess she can be. After saving the digital world, Tsurugi and the other children returned to the real world. In late 2006, another event occurred in an alternate universe that was the consequence of Yggdrasil's actions to find out about the relation between Digimon and humans. Above all, this event has had an impact beyond its own universe, affecting the original universes and many other universes. Tamer Daimon Marsaru, together with his Agumon, along with the combined efforts of other humans and Digimon, were able to put an end to Yggdrasil, who brought its logic to such an extreme that it treated the real world as a threat to be destroyed. The recurring wrongdoings committed by humans on Digimon has led Yggdrasil to view humanity as a threat, and Yggdrasil decided to exterminate humanity and ordered the destruction of the real world in order to save the digital world. Yggdrasil was eventually defeated by the combined efforts of humans and Digimon. Recognizing its defeat and the real power and potential of humans and Digimon, Yggdrasil decided to lay itself to rest and watch over everyone. The multiple instances of Yggdrasil's extreme actions have led it to shut down in all the universes, with homeostasis set up as the backup system of the digital world, taking over the role as the Digimon's god in certain Digimon universes, plausibly including the original universes, particularly the original universe number 2. This is presumably determined by the will of the digital world. In contrast to Yggdrasil's advertence, homeostasis was indifferent on most occasions and only acted when it detected that the balance was disturbed. Homeostasis was a neutral entity most of the time. It only intervened when the neutrality of the world was disrupted, but the said neutrality is subjective. Homeostasis accepted the world the way it was, and upheld the world even when there was something wrong with the world. Therefore, all sorts of catastrophic events such as the Tempest Crisis, the LNR War, the Crusader War, the Cross War, and so on, occurred during the period when homeostasis held the role as God predominantly in the absence of Yggdrasil. In 2007, a commemorative event occurred in the original universe number 2 and has had an effect in the original universe number 1 and other universes that are based on it. The DigiLab celebrated the 10th anniversary of the institution. It has been 10 years since the public discovery of Digimon and the public establishment of the DigiLab. Dracomon was made to be the mascot Digimon of the 10th anniversary. Dracomon is a Digimon that with potential to evolve into a pair of Digimon that would unite as one to be a member of the Royal Knights. There were 2 Dracomon to begin with. As one Dracomon traveled the digital world, it encountered the 4 holy beasts which it fought against, one after another. This Dracomon endured and evolved into Cordramon, Green, Grounddramon, and finally Breakdramon. On the other hand, as the other Dracomon traveled the digital world, it encountered the 4 great dragons which it fought against, one after another. This Dracomon endured and evolved into Cordramon, Blue, Wingdramon, and finally, it attained the form of Slayerdramon through completing the training that is called the Trial of the 4 Great Dragons, which can only be challenged by Dragon Digimon. Slayerdramon and Breakdramon eventually crossed paths and performed Jogress evolution to form Examon. Also, in the same year, 2007, the cataclysmic events, Tempest Crisis, and LNR War, occurred in the original universe number 2. The 7 great demon lords secretly released the crack program Tempest into the digital world, which affected the 4 holy beasts, among other Digimon, causing worldwide rampage as a consequence. The Tempest program caused the digicore of an infected Digimon, which consists of digital data naturally expressed in binary being converted into ternary, causing the Digimon to go wild and lose control, infecting other Digimon in the process. The Tempest Crisis was a means to achieve the plan of the 7 great demon lords, to be united as Ogudamon the Super Demon Lord, who is beyond the 7 great demon lords that embodies all the sins of the world and is capable of collapsing the world. On March 24, 2007, in the original universe number 2, the DigiLab released the Digimon Twin LNR. The Digimon Twin are digital devices that are offered in sets of 2 as a pair, Model L, Liberation, and Model R, Revolution. The Digimon Twin was formulated by the DigiLab in the attempt to resolve the Tempest Crisis. The Digimon Twin features the Twin Link System, a system that uses infrared to connect the 2 models and transfer digicore between the 2. This bypasses the link security and allows for more advanced data link. By unlocking data security and performing data link, it is possible to produce unnatural digitama, and the Digimon that is born from this digitama has its code forcibly decoded and allows evolutions that are sealed in the Digimon's digicore. The DigiLab called on the Tamers, particularly those with the Digimon twins, to log in the digital world via the battle terminal to resolve the Tempest Crisis and save the digital world. The Battle Terminal is an arcade machine developed by the DigiLab for the Tamers to access the digital world with their digital devices. The machine incorporates a battle system that utilizes the card reader to scan cards from the Digital Monster Card Game Alpha in order to assist the Digimon in battle. In the course of the Tempest Crisis, the LNR War, a conflict for supremacy, occurred between the L, Liberation, Army and the R, Revolution, Army, the 2 armies of Digimon who partnered with Tamers across the world that competed to resolve the Tempest Crisis. Commander Yu, an outstanding commander of the army, was able to put an end to the clash by unifying the 2 armies as one and organizing friendly battles so that they could grow as united Tamers. At the decisive battle, Examon, a Digimon that would be a royal knight, Jogress evolved from Slayerdramon and Breakdramon, was able to defeat Ogudamon with the combined efforts of the L Army and the R Army. Between 2009 and 2010, a calamitous event, Lost Evolution, that centered around the Selector, has occurred in an alternate universe, perhaps also the original universe number 2, that could have an effect in the other universes, plausibly including the original universe number 2. It is thought that the absence of Yggdrasil and inaction of homeostasis has left Colonel, the assumed virtual copy and alter ego of the human god, to step up and implement his ideology of artificial selectionism, for the better of the digital world. Colonel became the secret leader of the Selector, an organization that was to erase unnecessary things from the digital world that was becoming abundant with trash data. It is likely that Colonel was inspired and influenced by Yggdrasil previously. Colonel came to the conclusion that the existence of Tamers, Digimon and even evolution, specifically the inferior aspects, were useless data that needed to be erased from the digital world. To this end, the Selector have been sending the erasers, digital beings that were formed by fusing Tamers and Digimon, in order to erase unwarranted Tamers, weak Digimon and destroy the evolution system of the digital world, to cease Digimon from evolving into useless Digimon, so that less useless data will be created. The plan of the Selector was to send all the data back to where they came from, the ancient tree, which was the origin of the data and the evolution itself. It is thought that the ancient tree was the remnant of Yggdrasil's world tree in the digital world, that now was corrupted and misused by the Selector. Colonel's final plan was to gather the data of all the Tamers and Digimon of the digital world so that all returned to the ancient tree, then Colonel would take this data and to become one with all that already existed, and to rule a newly prepared digital world with only specially chosen beings selected by himself. In the end, this incident was resolved by Shu and Kazuna, the Tamers of that universe, who were able to defeat Colonel who had transformed into Giga Devast and later, Terra Devast, ending his threat for good. It is thought that the Selector's actions on the evolution system of the digital world that caused the lost evolution, could have an effect on the natural evolution of the other universes, plausibly including the original universe number 2. From 2010 up to 2011, the cataclysmic event, Cross War, occurred in certain alternate realities, plausibly including the original universe number 2, that ended up in the collapse of the digital world into many zones. Sometime prior to the Cross War, Bagramon, while still an archangel of death who was dedicated to God, informed Homeostasis about the plight of the Digimon. Negative human emotions have been affecting Digimon to mutate into dark, evil Digimon and to the state where the natural evolution of the Digimon ceased to occur, inasmuch as humans had lost their capacity to dream. It was a predicament to the Digimon, because Digimon are bound to live a predetermined life, as in evil Digimon are destined to do evil, it is their nature, but only to be destroyed by the others, good Digimon that do good and eliminate evil in the name of justice. To make matters worse, due to the Digimon's loss of their natural evolution capability, the one way out of this predetermined cycle, the fate of the Digimon was sealed. Homeostasis was unconcerned, as it was only dedicated to maintaining a balance of a digital world that was given, all are in order for homeostasis to watch over every time, as it answered Bagramon's questions about the digital world's inequality, which led Bagramon rebelled against it, and only to be scourged. Subsequently Bagramon came across Yggdrasil's server tree by chance and attained some of the power and knowledge of the previous god. With these power and knowledge, Bagramon armed another rebellion against homeostasis. Around this time, Bagramon and its younger brother, Dark Knightmon discovered the ability of Digicross. Digicross is a special type of evolutionary process in which multiple Digimon, referred to as Digicross units, combine together to come to be a single, more powerful form. One of the Digimon who comprises a Digicross Digimon controls the combined body, while all the others provide new powers, weapons, armor, other equipment, or even entirely new body parts for the lead Digimon to inhabit and use. In 2010, Bagramon, now a demon lord, instigated the Cross Wars to rebel against homeostasis again, and seek to destroy the digital world and all the Digimon in order to free them from their unjust fate and defend their remaining dignity. Prior to the Cross Wars, Bagramon went to ask the 7 great demon lords, Loosemon Fall Down Mode in particular, for help to rebel against homeostasis, the contemporary god, but Loosemon refused and maintained a neutral position to see the consequences of Bagramon's plan. It was during this meeting that Lilithmon met Bagramon and got interested in and fell in love with Bagramon, and Lilithmon went with Bagramon to be one of the 3 head officers of the Bagra army, alongside Tactimon and Blastmon. Aside from the 3 head officers, the Bagra army also consisted of a group known as the Big Death Stars, also known as the Death Generals, that were high-ranking members within the Bagra army. They were Neo Van Diemen, Dorbikmon, Splashmon, Zamielmon, Olegmon and Gravymon. Around the time of the Cross War, in an unexpected turn of events, the advancement of the digital technology in the real world has diminished its distance with the digital world. This induced distortion in the core of the digital world, and with the waves of aggressive wars aggravated the situation. The unstable core soon crumbled, forming the Code Crown fragments as a consequence, which in turn caused the collapse of the digital world into zones. The Code Crowns are legendary artifacts, fragments of the true Code Crown which shattered and resulted in the creation of the 108 zones of the digital world. The Code Crown exists in each zone, serving as the proof of rulership of the particular zone it represents, and the digital world can be reformatted with the restoration of all fragments into one. Towards the end, Cross Heart United Army, the allied army of the Cross Heart led by General Kudo Taiki and Blue Flare led by General Aonu Makiriha, together with the Royal Knights under the Order of Homeostasis, among many other Digimon, confronted the Bagra army and brought an end to the Cross War. In the end, Homeostasis admitted it may not have been able to give Bagramon a satisfactory answer, but relieved that the role has been fulfilled splendidly by Taiki and the other children, in proving that there are always hope and dream. Therefore, change and evolution are still possible, as shown in the evolution of Taiki's Shoutmon into Omega Shoutmon and many other Digimon regaining their ability to evolve in the ending, in the world where evolution has been long lost. It can be said that this is all part of Homeostasis's plan, as per the God's will, as in the end, all's well that ends well. It is assumed that ensuing the end of the Cross Wars, the digital world was reformatted back into one with the restoration of the Code Crown. From 2011 up to 2012, there were the apocalyptic event, Digiquartz Crisis, and the epic event, All-Stars Digimon Hunt, which involved the many legendary heroes of chosen children, tamers, generals and hunters that transcended across time and space of the many alternate universes, have occurred in an alternate universe, perhaps also the original universe number 2. It is plausible that the Digiquartz Crisis could have had an effect beyond its own universe if succeeded. At the end of the Cross Wars, in the aftermath of the Cross Heart United Army's battle with the Bagra Army, General Kudo Taiki of the Cross Heart United Army was able to achieve Final Cross, the ultimate form of Digicross which was enabled with the help of the Code Crown, assumingly also the will of Homeostasis. It allowed Taiki to combine his Shoutmon with all of his allies and nearly every Digimon in the digital world, to form Shoutmon Cross 7 Superior Mode and defeat the evil Emperor of the Bagra Army, Bagramon, who had digicrossed with Dark Knightmon to form Darkness Bagramon. Consequently, this had brought Quartzmon, the source of the Digiquartz Crisis, into life. Quartzmon started off as somewhat a distortion born out of the real world's ever-expanding digital power. It gained life after combined with the remnants of the evil Emperor's data. Quartzmon generated the Digiquartz, a mysterious space between the digital world and the real world where time flows at a different rate as well. Digiquartz was a part of Quartzmon, which it lured in Digimon and lived off their data to strengthen itself. Quartzmon's aim was to convert the entire world into Digiquartz, into a perfect world where the humanity it viewed as imperfect would be purged. As Quartzmon grew and got ever stronger, it started to digitize the planet Earth via the Digiquartz and finally fuse with the planet Earth in order to rewrite humans, Digimon, and all the data both the real world and the digital world contains, to be reborn into a single entity, as the very self of Quartzmon. In order to counteract the Digiquartz Crisis, the old clock shop man, the human form of Bagramon, now repented, has organized the Digimon Hunt, a competition that took place in the Digiquartz where hunters capture Digimon. The old clock shop man was also able to call for the legendary heroes from other universes for help in resolving the Digiquartz Crisis towards the end. Each of the legendary heroes was a chosen child, tamer, general and/or hunter who led a team of others to save their own universe. The 6 legendary heroes included Yargami Taichi and Motomiya Daisuke from the Digimon Adventure universe, Matsuda Takato from the Digimon Tamer's universe, Kanbara Takuya from the Digimon Frontier universe, Daimon Marsaru from the Digimon Savers universe, and Kudo Taiki from the Digimon Cross Wars universe. The purpose of the Digimon Hunt was to prove the mettle of a hunter from the Digimon Cross Wars universe, so that they could become the legendary hero in wielding the Brave Snatcher, a weapon created from the remaining right arm of Bagramon that possesses space-time power and was to be used against Quartzmon in order to hinder its actions, allowing it to be hunted and finally defeated. The Brave Snatcher required the powers of the 6 legendary heroes, and must be wielded by the legendary hero representing the hunters. The one who eventually had this honor was Hunter Akashi Targiro. At the end, backed by the other heroes, Targiro, together with his Gumdramon that evolved into a Restodramon superior mode and digicrossed with the brave Snatcher, dealt the final blow to the roots of Quartzmon, hunting it down and breaking the Digiquartz down, and saved the universe once and for all. Without the Digiquartz, all the worlds were returning to their original selves. Digimon were restored to the digital world, whereas humans were restored to the real world, while the legendary heroes were restored to each of their own universes. In 2012, a commemorative event occurred in the original universe number 2 and has had an effect in the original universe number 1 and other universes that are based on it. The DigiLab celebrated the 15th anniversary of the institution. It has been 15 years since the public discovery of Digimon and the public establishment of the DigiLab. Huckmon was made to be the mascot Digimon of the 15th anniversary. Huckmon is a Digimon that would evolve to be the final member of the Royal Knights. Huckmon acquired the title of Royal Knight through frequent, rigorous training at the direction of Genkumon, its mentor. As Huckmon traveled the digital world alongside the Sistermon sisters, intervening in the world's incessant conflicts, it evolved to Bao Huckmon, Savior Huckmon, then finally, Jesmon. In early 2012, the cataclysmic event, Crusader War, occurred in certain alternate realities, plausibly including the original universe number 2. The perennial absence of Yggdrasil and the indifference of homeostasis have led to the Crusader Wars in the digital world, where many Digimon fought in the attempt to take the place of Yggdrasil as god. Plutomon, the leader of the Titans, traveled to the conventional digital world from the digital world Iliad. Plutomon and the Titans were sent by Homeros to invade the conventional digital world to put an end to the Olympos 12, particularly Jupitermon, the leader of the Olympos 12 and the spiritual pillar of the concept of right and wrong in Iliad, that opposed the will of Homeros. Towards the end, the final battle between the Olympos 12 and the Titans took place as Jupitermon confronted and clashed with Plutomon. It is believed that Jupitermon defeated Plutomon and brought an end to the Crusader Wars. It is thought that at some point the Olympos 12 came to be acknowledged by Homeros to protect the digital world Iliad under Homeros's rule. In mid-2012, a crucial event centered around Vidium occurred in certain alternate realities that are based on the original universes, and has affected the original universes, and also many other universes. The uncontrolled power of the sub-life form Vidium has put the digital world in danger with the dimensional distortions that it caused. Vidium was originally a program, a special gateway system that was developed by Gigo Company to control the traffic of information online, as well as a means to connect the real and digital worlds. However, due to the high amount of information that was being transferred, Vidium began to develop awareness and become alive, as a digital life form, but only to be abused and abandoned by its creator in loneliness. The Global Information Global Organization, initialed as Gigo Company, is a company in the data communications industry that provided many services that are deeply connected to consumers' daily lives. However, behind the scenes, the company has been seeking to manipulate and control the digital world as a way to use the Digimon and its creation Vidium to commit sabotage against other corporations via the digital world's connections to the internet. In response to the threat of Vidium, and due to the inability of the system, presumably homeostasis, to protect the digital world, Yggdrasil, who has been resting on the Infinite Mountain for over the past 7 years, was revived to save the digital world from this crisis. This led to the reactivation of the X program and Death Xmon to attempt to destroy Vidium. Ensuingly, Yggdrasil and all other universes also returned to be the system in charge of the digital world and hold the role as the Digimon's god predominantly. This is presumably decided by the will of the digital world. On the other hand, Taiga, an exceptional tamer with the aptitude of the decode ability and unique adaptability to the digital world, was sent to the digital world along with his friends, due to an email with a digitization phenomena program that transfers material from the real world to the digital world. The email was to seek help from Taiga and his friends to resolve the Vidium crisis. It was sent by Mikagura Mirai, an esoteric, exceptional programmer and hacker who was previously a researcher of Gigo Company. Mirai was caught up in an accident of a digitization experiment conducted by the company, that caused her to lose her physical body while part of her consciousness in corrupted data state to be reborn in the digital world, as her younger self in the form of a substantive hologram, but Mirai lost the memory of her past in the process. Due to the accident, Mireille was sent to a special subspace of the digital world where she gained the admin privilege of the digital world, presumably granted by the system, which allows her to access the parallel incarnation of the digital world. With the admin privilege, Mireille is to be in charge of the DigiLab facility that is located in an isolated space that can be accessed by tamers, hackers from different universes, in which they can manage their Digimon there. At the decisive battle, Vidium was defeated by Taiga with Digimaru, his partner Digimon, presumably Agumon that evolved into Rustaranomon. Vidium realized all the suffering it had caused and returned to the void to save the digital world. Without Vidium, the boundaries between the worlds will start to expand once again, and as time passes, the travel between the worlds will be difficult. As such, not long after saving the digital world, Taiga and his friends returned to the real world. From 2013 up to 2014, in the original universes, the DigiLab identified the members of a number of Digimon groups that have been discovered over the years. Jesmon, the last royal knight, was found by Yggdrasil in its effort, an experiment that used Arcadimon as a means to make dark energy that summoned the 7 great demon lords, in order to manifest Ogudamon and seek for Jesmon, Huckmon, the superior species who was able to overcome Ogudamon. With Jesmon, the royal knights finally completed with 13 members, alongside Alphamon, Omegamon, Craniummon, Dukemon, Magnamon, Dynasmon, Lord Knightmon, Ulforce-Vidramon, Sleepmon, Duftmon, Examon, and Gankumon. Apart from that, all the 5 members of a delinquent group known as the Bantayo were identified. Aside from the existing Bunchaleomon, the leader of the group, the other members include Bunchagolanmon, Bunchamarmemon, Bunchastingmon, and Bunchalilymon. While more members like Assaultmon and Canondramon were added to a military group known as the D Brigade that consists of a huge army of Command-Dramon, Seals-Dramon, and Tank-Dramon, with Dark-Dramon being the D Brigade's final weapon. And an outlaw group, the Three Musketeers, was discovered. It comprises Magna Kidmon, the leader of the group, along with members like Beelstarmon and Gundramon, and associated Digimon like Avenge Kidmon. There was also discovery of Digimon groupings that are not exactly classified as groups. Like the one that based on the Neverland, referred to as the Petermon's Band, with prominent members like Petermon, the captain of the band, and Tinkermon, the fairy of the band, among other child-level Digimon that inhabit the Never-Ever Land, a children's world built by Petermon and Tinkermon, and there are other Digimon like Captain Hookmon that is associated to the Petermon's Band. And the one that based on the Journey to the West, referred to as the Sanzomon's Party, with pilgrim members like Sanzomon, the master, mentor of the party, and its disciples, Gokumon, Chohakamon, Sargomon and or Shawujinmon, and there are other Digimon like Shakamon, Kinkakumon and Jinkakumon that are associated to the Sanzomon's party. In early 2015, a critical event centered around Heaters occurred in an alternate universe and has affected the other universes. The incursion of the mysterious life form Heaters in the digital world has infested up to Yggdrasil, that the Mother Eater had eroded through to Yggdrasil's core and overridden most of Yggdrasil's functionality, which caused the wide-scale loss of functionality in Yggdrasil. This has affected the other Yggdrasil that were interconnected in the other universes as well, causing them to be unable to function well. The Eaters are non-sentient hyperdimensional entities above the concepts of spacetime that devour and eat away at things on evolutionary instinct. They change themselves to integrate what has been absorbed. This process leaves the structure and algorithms of their prey to become glitched. The Eaters are all operating under the shared data network, a single hive mind coordinated by its central unit, the Mother Eater. The Mother Eater is a hyperdimensional entity that oversees Eater in the world hierarchy and accumulates the eaten data. In the end, with the help of the others, this incident was resolved by Iba Takumi and Iba Ami, the resilient hackers of that universe, who had traveled to the digital world and were able to defeat the Mother Eater. Upon the Mother Eater's defeat, Yggdrasil was restored to its normal state and it resumed its normal functions, while the interconnected Yggdrasil in the other universes regained their full functionality. Subsequently, Yggdrasil performed a reformat in order to restore the digital world and remove the lingering effects left by the Eaters. The Eaters ceased existing the way they were, due to the loss of the Mother Eater, and because the Eaters being somewhat atemporal entities, affecting them in the present would also affect the past and the future. The loss of the data accumulated by the Mother Eater led the existence of the Eaters, as in the forms they attained so far following their corruption in the virtual space, to be removed from the history of the universe, and the Eaters were reverted back to their original harmless state. In order to completely restore the digital world, all foreign objects must be removed. As such, Iba Takumi, Iba Ami and the others returned to the real world. As the real world was relatively assimilated with the digital world due to the Eaters, the reformat also affected the real world, where the history of the universe was rewritten that the incidents caused by the Eaters never happened. And with the bifurcated axes of time of the different universes were united, the contact with the Digimon turned out differently than before. The Digimon in this alternate universe were discerned to be something sort of similar to that of the original universe. As the characters of the digital monster, Raising App, being artificial lifeforms due to the human intervention, while they were formerly seen as mysterious virus programs with artificial intelligence, that in actuality, being spiritual creatures that existed since ancient time. It is assumed that the unification of the worldview and settings of Digimon in this alternate universe with that of the original universe was due to the Great Will, the will of the digital world, particularly the will of Yggdrasil of the original universe, who is the central unit that can control its counterparts that are coordinated through collective consciousness. And also, the awareness of Yggdrasil of this alternate universe about the origin of the Digimon in the other universes that caused the reality in its universe to change and combine. In early 2016, a continuative event has occurred in certain alternate realities that are based on the original universe, plausibly including the original universe number 2. 17 years after the Analog Man incident, the remnant of Analog Man's consciousness in the singular zone found his way to the digital world of a parallel universe. In the process, Analog Man possessed Suzuki Shoma, an ambitious tamer, and used him to spread the brain hack program that turned the infected Digimon into altered forms, as Mugendramon. This became known as a curse in that digital world. The curse also gave rise to a number of other abnormalities in the digital world, including the network outages that rendered the travel from the digital world to the real world practically impossible, trapping those in the digital world. Analog Man's aim was to turn all Digimon and the digital world into altered forms, as energy for the Enforcer, Omegamon Zwart defeat that came into being, presumably after injected with the BH program by Shoma on Omegamon Zwart. The Enforcer would evolve into Omegamon Alter B, and force open all the gates between worlds using the energy, then execute the AR, Advanced Realm, plan. In order to merge the countless worlds, an Analog Man would be the ruler of them all. In the end, with the help of the others including Marmeo, this incident was resolved by Takuto and Shiki, the resolute tamers of that universe, who had traveled to the digital world and were able to defeat the possessed Shoma and his Omegamon Alter B, thwarting Analog Man's plan once again. Upon the defeat, Shoma was freed from Analog Man's curse. As the remnant of Analog Man's consciousness was dissipated, it is assumed that now that Analog Man was exposed and enervated due to the defeat, this allowed the digital world's defense system, which is considered as part of the will of the digital world, to intervene and imprison Analog Man back in a section of the digital world's blank memory. Subsequently, Floatia, an advanced city of the digital world where Digimon currently resided, launched the Reincarnation Project, a plan to bring about the rebirth of the digital world that utilized Omegamon Alter B, the enforcer of the digital world who has power that can bring about a total purge, in order to clear the digital world from the curse, the contamination of the BH program. It was then the digital world recovered from its network outages, making it now possible to return to the real world. As such, Takuto, Shiki and the others returned to the real world, but they would be returning to the digital world later after the Reincarnation Project was completed. This settled another incident caused by Analog Man that was solved for the time being, but it is plausible that Analog Man will probably make another comeback in time to come. In 2017, a commemorative event occurred in the original universe number 2 and has had an effect in the original universe number 1 and other universes that are based on it. The DigiLab celebrated the 20th anniversary of the institution, it has been 20 years since the public discovery of Digimon and the public establishment of the DigiLab. SUBTITLES was made to be the mascot Digimon of the 20th anniversary. SUBTITLES is a member of the Legend Arms. The Legend Arms, formerly known as the Legendary Ancient Weapons, is a group that formed by weapon Digimon like Spotamon, Armamon, Omega Armamon Burst Mode, SUBTITLES along with its evolution line, as in Zuba-Eagermon, Duramon, Durandamon, and Ludomon along with its evolution line, as in Tia-Ludomon, Regiludomon, Briwolodramon, also Ragnalordmon, the Jogris form of Durandamon and Briwolodramon. Also, in the same year, 2017, a corrective event occurred in the original Universe Number 1 and other universes that bifurcated from it, having the past history of the Project Arc. The DigiLab's development division came back to operation 14 years after it had been suspended. The DigiLab has undergone a reformation, a reboot to return to how it started, that is, to investigate Digimon for public interests and with peaceful approaches. With the return of the development division, the DigiLab remade the first doc, and developed the Digital Monster version 20th. It was released on the same day as when the original doc was released back then, June 26. The version 20th device has plenty of new features like raising 2 Digimon at once, from a roster of more than 100 Digimon, with a number of newly discovered Digimon species. At the same time, the DigiLab revealed more information and research results about Digimon via print media like books, periodicals, and online platforms like websites and social media. In 2018, due to the success of the version 20th device and the acclaimed response to their researches, the team decided to step up their efforts and remade another digital device, and developed the Digimon Pendulum version 20th. Likewise, it was released on the same day as when the original Digimon Pendulum was released back then, June 21st. The Digimon Pendulum version 20th maintains most of the features from Digital Monster version 20th, and adds a lot more new features like introducing Copymon in the device with a copy function that allows the copy of Digimon into the stock, and the comeback of those features debuted in the original Digimon Pendulum. In around late 2018 and early 2019, a continuative event centered around the X-Digimon occurred in the original Universe Number 1 and could have an effect in the other universes, being the reconciliation with the X-Digimon in the Digimon universes. Due to the contamination by the X program, the old digital world had become a world of death, and was thus under strict lockdown. Yggdrasil planned to delete the old digital world, however due to the X program there could be potential problems during the delete process, like the implication of the NDW, New Digital World, with the X program, thus Yggdrasil sought for a reconnaissance of the old digital world. After a decade or so had passed since the activation of the Project Arc, the concentration of the X program in the old digital world has decreased, so the Royal Knights were sent to investigate the situation there. They transformed into their X antibody forms after endowed the X antibody by Yggdrasil to be immunized against the X program. The Royal Knights found out that, not only that there were still lives there, but the Digimon there were in constant chaos and strife for the sovereignty of the areas. The Royal Knights enforced the Battle Royale rule proposed by Jesmon X to keep the battles for supremacy in order to resolve the chaos. Through the Battle Royale system, Grand Dracomon defeated Digimon in the old digital world, forced them to undergo Death X evolution, and then sent them to the Dark Area. Taking advantage of Grand Dracomon's actions that have sent X antibody to the Dark Area and affected the boundary of the Dark Area, the 7 Great Demon Lords attained the X antibody, and transformed into their X antibody forms, and were able to escape from the Dark Area. Once again, Lusmon X schemed to destroy every digital world in existence. During the battles between the Royal Knights and 7 Great Demon Lords, Domoto Kota and Musha Yuji arrived to the battlefield on the backs of Alphamon and Oryumon, whilst also bringing Omegamon X and a massive amount of good Digimon to help even out the large evil army of the Demon Lords. It was then Ogudomon X, who by only existing would collapse the world, was formed, as a consequence of Lusmon X's scheme, by fusing the 7 Great Demon Lords that used the 7 copies of Diablomon X as their vessels. At the decisive battle, Jesmon GX, the awakened form of Jesmon X inheriting the X antibody of Genkomon, defeated Ogudomon X with the combined efforts of all the Royal Knights. Due to the over-expenditure of energy in the ultimate move to defeat Ogudamon X, Jesmon GX reverted to Jesmon X as it lost the power of GX. Upon the defeat, the 7 great demon lords were released from the fusion of Ogudamon X and returned to the dark area, but a Digitama was left behind, which Gankumon entrusted Jesmon X to raise it, and stated that the Digitama could probably be the next Royal Knight, as Gankumon then retired from being a Royal Knight. It is believed that the Digitama could be either of Diablomon, Karamon, for being the fusion intermediary of Ogudamon X, or of Loosemon for being the core consciousness of Ogudamon X. In due course, Yggdrasil approved the old digital world and performed an update to integrate the NDW with the old digital world. This lifted the lockdown and free movement is now possible between the two digital worlds. This is partly due to the efforts of Kota and Yuji. Kota and Yuji promised Yggdrasil that they will do their best from the real world for a way to expand the capacity of the digital world as a countermeasure to the expansive data amount of Digimon. Kota and Yuji then asked Yggdrasil not to interfere with Digimon excessively and that the two of them will definitely come running to help the digital world in times of crisis. Because of the endeavors of Kota and Yuji, who had traveled all over the digital world over the years in order to help others to have a better understanding of the X-Digimon, Yggdrasil now recognized the usefulness of the X-Antibody, X-Evolution, and the hidden evolution potential held within all Digimon. On March 14, 2019, the DigiLab released the Digital Monster X, an integration of the DOC Digital Monster with the Digimon Pendulum X. It was developed by the DigiLab with regards to the event correlating to X-Digimon. It features many mechanics, like the XAI, X-Antibody Indicator, system for raising and battling, the map system for quest adventure, and the backup system to save and switch the Digimon in raising. In late 2020 and early 2021, the DigiLab was still retracing its steps. The organization made more in-depth researches and discoveries about Digimon, especially those in the Folder continent and more on the Digimon's fields. In accordance with their efforts, the DigiLab developed the Digimon Pendulum Z series. The Digimon Pendulum Z maintains most of the features from the Digimon Pendulum series, and includes a roster of more than 100 Digimon, with many newly discovered Digimon that can be raised with the device. On October 5, 2020, the DigiLab released the Digimon Pendulum Z, and the Digimon Pendulum Z2, in the following year, on March 17. In 2021, the DigiLab would achieve a breakthrough in their development of digital devices. On March 13, 2021, the DigiLab released the Vital Bracelet Digital Monster, a wearable terminal-type digital device. The Vital Bracelet is a whole new device developed at pace with the discovery of Digimon born from human vital data. There are three main features of the Vital Bracelet, which are Pulse Link, where the vital value and the mental state of Digimon fluctuate according to the user's activity data, heart rate or steps, leading to development and evolution. Touch Link, where battle encounter is activated by touching the Vital Bracelet on devices that emits radio waves, the NFC, near-field communication. And App Log Link, where the Digimon in the Vital Bracelet can be managed with a dedicated app, Vital Bracelet Lab, which also offer other functions. The Vital Bracelet utilizes the DIM, Digimon Identified Memory, card, a special memory card that can be inserted into the device to unlock new areas, new rosters of Digimon to be trained with the device. With the Vital Bracelet, the DigiLab marked a new milestone in the technological advancement of the digital devices. It would seem that there is the prospect of the DigiLab making more progress in the future. And that is all for the stories to be told about the DigiLab, along with the histories of the Digimon universes, but this is not the end, for that the DigiLab is far from over and there is no end to the beginning of Digimon universes formed through infinitely branching spacetime where endless tales of Digimon unfold. Thanks for watching, especially to those who made it this far for this long-form content. This is an actualization of one's ambition and attempt in interpreting and unifying the Digimon universes. It took an enormous amount of effort and time to make this. Hopefully this content can be worthwhile. If it is, please like, comment, share and subscribe for more. Also, please follow Digimonology on social media, and consider donating to Digimonology via the particular platforms. For more information, check out the description and the comment section. All forms of support matter and are very much appreciated.